Chapter 1, a deep, confident voice cut through the air behind me. Well, well, well. Look who it is, Suze Simon. Okay, I'll be honest. When an attractive guy speaks to me, and trust me, you could tell this one was gorgeous just by the smoothness of his tone, the way he lingered on my name, I notice. Sue me. I'm 16. My world isn't entirely consumed by debating the latest designer swimwear or the newest long-wear lip products. So yeah, even though I technically have a boyfriend, if you can even call him that, I couldn't help flipping my hair a little as I turned around. After all the effort I'd put into styling it that morning, fighting both humidity and the stubborn coastal fog, it deserved a moment in the spotlight. Then I saw who it was. The smirk on his unfairly handsome face was just slightly lopsided, like he already knew exactly how thrown off I was. "Suze," he said, mock scolding. The sun caught the highlights in his messy dark curls, and his tan made his grin even brighter. "I show up as the new kid, nervous as hell, and you can't even say hi. Some friend you are." My throat went bone dry. What was he doing here? Running wasn't an option. Imagine the gossip if I bolted from some random hot guy in the middle of campus. So instead, I lifted my chin and tried to breeze past him like he was nothing. Big mistake. His hand shot out, fingers clamping around my arm like a steel trap. I could have punched him back in Brooklyn. I'd earned a reputation for a reason. But something told me that wouldn't end well. Not with him. I had planned to kick off the school year in style, wearing my favorite mocha mist outfit with sleek black capris and a soft pink sweater I'd scored on sale, not tangled in some ridiculous argument. But here I was, surrounded by classmates tossing casual greetings and admiring my outfit, while I fought the urge to punch the new guy. Worse, I had a sinking feeling he might actually hit me back. My fingers curled into fists, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Let go of my arm," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Paul didn't release me right away. His grip was icy, like he wasn't entirely human, and his smirk made my skin crawl. "Suze," he said, tilting his head. "You don't seem thrilled to see me." "Still holding my arm," I snapped. Finally, he dropped his hand, but the chill lingered. "Look," he said, feigning sincerity, "I regret how things ended last time." Last time. The memory hit me like a freight train, that endless hallway, doors leading to nowhere, the suffocating dread of being trapped. And Paul, standing there laughing while Jessie and I scrambled for a way out. His amusement had only stopped when Jessie decked him. Now here he was, standing in the breezeway of Junipero Serra Mission Academy like nothing had happened. The morning fog clung to the campus, the kind that always burned off by noon, leaving behind perfect California sunshine. But the warmth didn't reach me. Not with him here. Cece and Adam strolled past, waving like it was just another first day of school. The normalcy of it was almost funny. Once they were gone, I turned back to Paul, my voice low. "You mean the part where you tried to kill me?" This time he flinched. Maybe it was the accusation, or maybe he finally heard the tremor in my words. He ran a hand through his tousled curls, his sun-kissed fingers catching in the dark strands. "Come on, Suze," he said, his voice tinged with something like wounded pride. "You know I'd never actually hurt you." A laugh bubbled up in my throat, nervous, involuntary, as my pulse hammered against my ribs. "Sure," I managed. "Whatever you say." His expression darkened. "I'm serious, I just hate losing, that's all." Losing. I studied his face, searching for any hint of remorse. But all I saw was the same guy who'd nearly gotten Jessie killed with his sneaky, underhanded tricks. Now he wanted to pretend it was just some playground rivalry. "What exactly did you lose?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Because from where I'm standing, you didn't lose anything. You just got caught." His eyes locked onto mine, sharp and unsettling. Didn't I? That voice, the same one that haunted my nightmares, echoing through endless dark hallways where every step could send me tumbling into nothingness, was layered with something I couldn't decipher. It sent a chill down my spine. And then he smiled, all perfect teeth and effortless charm, like he'd stepped straight out of a cologne ad. "Let's start fresh, Suze," he said, tilting his head. "New year, new us." "Not a chance," I shot back, relieved my voice stayed steady. "In fact, do us both a favor and stay out of my way." He chuckled, flashing that politician-perfect grin. "Or what? You'll send your knight in shining armor after me?" I stiffened. Jesse would tear him apart if he knew, but Jesse wasn't mine to call. Not really. The guy must have seen the flicker of doubt in my eyes because he smirked. "Ah, so that's the deal. Honestly, Suze, I always thought you could do better than..." Before he could finish, Cece appeared, her sensible flats clicking against the linoleum. She'd sworn up and down last night that this year would be different, no more trailing after guys. But here she was, zeroed in on the one person I wanted to avoid. "Hey, Suze," she said, polite but firm. Unlike me, Cece had spent her summer interning at a community center, not splurging on designer jeans or lip gloss. Not that she'd ever care about that stuff anyway, that was lucky, because as an albino, she couldn't just walk into any store and grab makeup off the shelf. Everything had to be custom ordered. "Who's this?" she asked, eyeing the guy beside me. I wasn't in the mood for introductions. Honestly, I was tempted to march straight to the principal's office and demand to know why they'd let someone like him into a decent school. But before I could move, he stuck out his hand, smooth, confident, and flashed that grin that used to charm me but now sent a shiver down my spine. "Hey, I'm Paul Slater. Nice to meet you." Paul Slater. The name itself sounded harmless, like some guy you'd meet at a coffee shop, not someone who'd make your skin crawl. But Cece didn't know that. She had no idea he was the kind of guy who could smile while twisting the truth. If she noticed his grip was a little too cold, she didn't show it. "Cece Webb," she said, shaking his hand with her usual no-nonsense energy. "You must be new. I've never seen you around before." Paul blinked, those unfairly long lashes of his catching the light. My stepbrother Jake had the same thing, but on him it just made him look sleepy. On Paul, it gave off this effortless, rock star vibe. I shot Cece a nervous glance. She was sharp, but was anyone really immune to that kind of charm? "First day," Paul said, grinning again. "Lucky for me, I already know Ms. Simon here." "How convenient," Cece replied, her pale eyebrows lifting. She loved big words, probably from editing the school paper. "Did you two go to the same school before?" "No," I cut in before he could answer. "We didn't. We should get to class before we're late." Paul, of course, wasn't worried about being late. Trouble was his comfort zone. "Suze and I had a thing this summer," he told Cece, watching her violet eyes widen behind her glasses. "A thing." She repeated, turning to me. "There was no thing," I said quickly. "Trust me, nothing happened." But Cece wasn't buying it. Her expression said it all. She knew I wasn't telling her everything, and why would she believe me? I'd kept so much from her already. "So you guys broke up," she pressed. "We didn't break up," Paul said smoothly, that smirk still in place. "Because we were never together, I wanted to scream. You think I'd ever choose him?" "He's not who you think he is, Cece." Paul looked like any other guy at first glance, but there was something off about him, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. And if he wasn't entirely human, what did that make me? The thought sent a chill down my spine. We were more alike than I wanted to admit, even to myself. Before I could dwell on it, Sister Ernestine's sharp voice cut through the air. "Miss Simon, Miss Webb, shouldn't you be heading to class?" 3 months hadn't softened her presence one bit. She loomed over us, her habit billowing behind her like dark storm clouds, that massive crucifix glinting against her chest. With a dismissive wave, she shooed us toward the lockers lining the mission's sunlit courtyard. "Move along, or you'll be late." We obeyed, but Paul stuck close, chatting with Cece as if they were old friends. "Suze and I go way back," he said smoothly. "Met at the Pebble Beach Resort." My hands shook as I spun the locker combination. This couldn't be happening. Why was he here? Why now? I thought I was finally free of him. I grabbed the first books I touched, slamming the locker shut like a barrier between us. Gotta run, I muttered. Homeroom's waiting. Paul's gaze dropped to the books in my arms, my flimsy armor. You won't find what you need in those, he said, his voice low. I didn't want to ask, I didn't want to know, but the question slipped out anyway. Find what? His eyes locked onto mine, icy and knowing. The answers. Why you were chosen, what you really are. The air left my lungs. He didn't have to spell it out. I understood. He was talking about the ability we shared, the one he wielded like a weapon while I fumbled in the dark. And suddenly, the hallway felt way too small. Cece stood frozen, her gaze darting between us like we were speaking in code. Paul didn't miss a beat. When you're ready to hear the truth about yourself, he said smoothly, you'll know where to find me, because I'll still be here. Then he turned and strolled away, his effortless stride sending a ripple of whispers through the hallway. Cece blinked up at me, her violet eyes huge behind her glasses. What was that about? She whispered. And who the heck is Jessie? I couldn't answer her. How could I? Nobody would believe the truth, not about Jessie, not about Paul, and definitely not about me. The only person who knew the whole story was Father Dominic, and that was only because he was part of it too. Sitting across from him in his office later, I slumped in my chair with a groan. How did this even happen? Behind his massive mahogany desk, Father Dom looked exhausted but patient, a look that suited him, especially since campus gossip insisted he somehow got more handsome with age. At 65, he was all silver hair and sharp cheekbones, a saintly Adonis in wire-rimmed glasses. Right now, though, he just looked guilty. Susanna, I'm sorry, he said, rubbing his temples. Between prepping for the new semester and the Father Seraph Festival, I didn't even check the enrollment lists. He sighed. I truly regret this. Regret. That was rich. He wasn't the one stuck sharing 2 classes, homeroom and U.S. history, with Paul Slater. 2 hours a day, staring at the guy who'd nearly gotten my boyfriend killed and left me for dead. And that didn't even include assembly or lunch. Another hour of torture. Father Dom flipped through Paul's file, frowning. Not that I could have stopped him anyway. His grades, test scores, recommendations, they're flawless. On paper, he's a better candidate than you were. I crossed my arms. Test scores don't measure character. My own mediocre grades had almost kept me out of Mission Academy when Mom dragged us to California for her fairytale wedding to Andy. Father Dom pulled off his glasses, rubbing them on his robe. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. No, he admitted wearily, settling them back on his nose. They don't. Susanna, are you absolutely sure this boy's intentions aren't genuine? Father Dominic asked, his voice calm but insistent. Paul might just be searching for direction. With the right guidance, he could realize his mistakes and change for the better. Yeah, sure, Father Dom, I shot back, rolling my eyes. And maybe pigs will start flying this afternoon. Father Dominic gave me that look, the one he always used when I was being too cynical. Unlike me, he had this annoying habit of seeing the good in people, even when they hadn't earned it. You'd think after everything Paul Slater had pulled, Father D would have learned his lesson by now. But nope. I choose to believe, he said, adjusting his glasses, until proven otherwise, that Paul is here at Mission Academy because he wants to learn. Not just algebra and history, Susanna, but the lessons you and I might teach him. Maybe he regrets what he's done. Maybe he wants a second chance, just like you did last year, and as decent people, it's our job to help him. Until we see otherwise, we should give him that chance. I wanted to groan. This was, hands down, the worst idea ever, but the annoying part, I didn't actually have proof Paul was up to no good. Not yet, anyway. Now, Father Dom said, shutting Paul's file and leaning back in his creaky chair, it's been a while. How are you holding up, and how's Jessie? My face went hot. Seriously. Just hearing his name made me blush now, pathetic. I muttered, praying Father D wouldn't notice. Fine. Good, he said absently, scanning his bookshelf. He mentioned wanting to borrow something. Ah, here we go. He handed me a massive leather-bound tome that probably weighed as much as a small dog. Critical theory since Plato, he announced with a grin. Jessie should enjoy this. No kidding. Jessie had a thing for the dullest books ever written. Maybe that was why he wasn't exactly responding to me the way I wanted. I was too interesting for his taste. Excellent, Father Dom murmured, clearly distracted. The Archbishop's upcoming visit had him in knots, especially with all the fuss over Father Sarah's feast day. Some groups were pushing for sainthood, and the whole thing was turning into a headache. Just keep an eye on Paul, he added. A structured environment like ours might be exactly what he needs. I barely held back a scoff. Father D had no clue what he was dealing with. What if he doesn't? I pressed. Father Dominic sighed, adjusting his glasses. We'll deal with that if it happens. Go on now, your lunch hour won't last forever. I stepped outside, the weight of the ancient book in my arms. The morning haze had burned off, leaving the sky a crisp, cloudless blue. Hummingbirds darted between hibiscus blooms in the courtyard, while tourists in cargo shorts snapped photos of the mission's fountain. Our school doubled as a historic site, complete with a gift shop selling overpriced postcards. Palm fronds rustled above me, salt air drifting in from the coast. Another perfect day in Carmel. So why did my stomach twist like I'd swallowed glass? I forced a breath. Maybe Father Dom was right. Maybe Paul had changed. But then why couldn't I shake the nightmare? The endless hallway, the choking fog, my own frantic heartbeat as I searched for an exit. It haunted me nightly, leaving me gasping. Funny how reality felt just as unnerving. Paul's sudden reappearance gnawed at me. How did he know so much about what we could do? There's no Mediator 101 handbook, no online forums. Google Mediator, and you'll get divorce attorneys, not ghost talkers. I'd spent most of my life figuring it out alone, ever since my 6-year-old self realized Dad's ghost at the funeral wasn't a grief-induced hallucination. But Paul acted like he had a roadmap. Even Father Dom, who'd seen decades more of this than us, admitted he didn't have all the answers. Sure, we could interact with the dead, but was that it? Paul seemed to think there was more, and that terrified me. People like him didn't show up without an agenda. Was he really just lonely for his own kind? Or was there something darker pulling him back to Carmel? The doubt coiled tighter, sharper than the ocean breeze. Maybe Jessie actually does love me and is just playing it cool because, let's face it, the two of us together would raise more eyebrows than a surprise pop quiz. Sure, and maybe I'll wake up tomorrow as student body president. Oh wait, that's not happening either. I was doing my best to push those thoughts aside during lunch, the Jessie drama, not the delusional popularity fantasy, when I found myself wedged between Adam and Cece on a bench outside. I popped open a can of diet soda, took a sip, and nearly sprayed it everywhere when Cece blurted, "Okay, enough stalling. Who is this Jessie guy? And don't dodge the question this time." Soda shot out of my nose, splattering my sweater. Cece barely blinked. Relax, it's sugar-free, no stains. Now why haven't we met him? Adam, finally recovering from the spectacle of my nasal soda fountain, chimed in. And how does Paul know him when we do? I wiped my face with a napkin and glanced over at Paul, who was holding court with Kelly Prescott and the rest of the in-crowd, all of them cracking up at something he'd just said. Jessie, just some guy, I muttered, knowing I wasn't getting out of this one. Some guy, Cece echoed, crunching on a baby carrot. Some guy you're apparently dating, according to Paul. I shifted uncomfortably. I mean, kind of, it's not that simple. Not simple. My thing with Jessie made quantum physics look like a coloring book. Cece crossed her legs, looking way too pleased with herself. So, where'd you meet? Here I was, actually talking about Jessie with the two people I'd been dodging for months. He lives near me, I said, avoiding the whole truth. Adam snatched a carrot from Cece's bag. He go to RLS. Not exactly. Cece's eyes widened. Don't tell me he's from Carmel High. He's not in school anymore, I admitted, knowing she wouldn't drop it. He graduated. Ooh, an older man, Cece teased. No wonder you've been hiding him. College. Taking a break, I said vaguely. You know, figuring things out. Adam leaned back, basking in the sun. A slacker, Suze. You deserve someone with ambition. Someone like, oh, I don't know, me. Cece rolled her eyes, used to his antics. How long has this been going on? I slumped. I don't even know. This whole thing is different. Yeah, I've known him for a while, but actually dating him, that's uncharted territory, and honestly, I'd rather not get into it right now. Get into what? A familiar voice cut through the air as a shadow fell across our bench. I glanced up, squinting against the sunlight, and there stood David, my 13-year-old stepbrother, his bright red hair practically glowing in the heat. Nothing, I said quickly. Out of everyone in my blended family, and yes, I considered the Ackermans family now, even though it used to just be Mom and me, David was the one who came closest to figuring me out. He knew I wasn't just some moody teenager going through a phase, and he definitely knew about Jessie, well, sort of. He'd noticed my weird disappearances and sudden mood shifts, but he had no clue what was really going on. Now here he was, standing in front of our bench like he owned the place, which was bold, considering the upperclassmen usually didn't take kindly to 8th graders invading their turf. With his scrawny frame, braces, and ears that stuck out, he looked about as out of place as a penguin in the desert. Check this out, he said, shoving a crumpled flyer at me. I took it and scanned the page, some ridiculous ad for a hot tub party at 99 Pinecrest Drive this Friday. The flyer promised hot frothy fun, and suggested swimsuits were optional, especially for girls. A badly drawn cartoon of a girl chugging beer took up half the page. No way you're going, I said, tossing it back at him. You're way too young, and honestly, someone should report this to your school. 8th graders shouldn't be throwing parties like this. Cece, who had snatched the flyer from David, gave me a look. Suze. I mean it, I went on. I expected better from you, David. These things always end badly. Sure, some people might have fun, but trust me, someone's gonna end up in the with alcohol poisoning or worse. It's all fun and games until someone cracks their head open. Suze. Cece waved the flyer right in front of my face. 99 Pinecrest Drive, that's your house, isn't it? My stomach dropped as I grabbed the paper back. David, what the hell were you thinking? It wasn't me, he squeaked, his voice cracking. Brad's the one handing these out in social studies. Even some 7th graders got them. My gaze snapped toward where Brad was standing, my fingers tightening around the flyer he was propped against the basketball hoop, attempting to pull off some kind of effortless charm, which was laughable for someone whose brain seemed permanently stuck in neutral. Excuse me, I said, rising to my feet. I have an urgent appointment with a crime scene. Then I marched across the court, gripping that neon orange flyer like a warrant. Brad spotted me immediately. His face went pale the second he recognized what I was holding. He bolted, but I cut him off near the water fountain, shoving the paper in his face. Seriously, I said, keeping my voice steady, you actually believe Mom and Andy would sign off on this, whatever this disaster is? Brad's fear twisted into stubbornness. He jutted his chin out. They won't find out. No harm, no foul. Brad, I sighed. Sometimes I pitied him, he was just so clueless. You really think they won't notice when their brand new hot tub turns into a spring break reject pool? Nope, he shot back, because they won't even be home. Dad's got that conference in San Francisco and your mom's tagging along. Ring any bells? It didn't. Had they even told me? Sure, I'd been holed up in my room a lot, but missing something this big? No way. Before I could respond, Brad leaned in, his voice sharp. And if you rat me out, you'll regret it. I stared at him like he'd lost his mind. I'll regret it, I scoffed. Buddy, if Andy catches wind of this party, you're the one getting sentenced to house arrest until graduation, not me. Brad's smirk turned ugly. Try me, because if you breathe a word, I'll spill about your little midnight visitor. Detention. That's Junipero Sarah's reward for decking your stepbrother in broad daylight with a teacher watching. I just don't get it, Suze, Mrs. Elkins said, shaking her head. She doubled as the biology teacher and the after-school warden for troublemakers like me. First day back, and this is how you kick things off. But she didn't get it. How could I explain that sometimes? Everything just snaps. Finding out my stepbrother knew my biggest secret, something I'd kept hidden from my family for months, was bad enough. But realizing the nightmare figure from my dreams was now walking the halls of my school, disguised as some preppy heartthrob in designer clothes, that sent me spiraling. I couldn't explain any of it to Mrs. Elkins, though. I just sat there, watching the clock crawl toward 4 o'clock like it was stuck in molasses. When the bell finally rang, she gave me that disappointed teacher look. I hope you've learned something today, Suze, she said. Fighting in school. Not exactly role model behavior for the younger students, is it? Me, not setting a good example. What about Brad? He was the one planning to turn our house into a frat party, and yet he had me cornered. He knew it, too. At lunch, he'd leaned in with that smug grin and said, "Think you're so clever, huh? Letting that guy sneak into your room every night. What's his deal, anyway? Climbing through your bay window like some kind of ghostly Romeo. Guess your little secret isn't so secret anymore. Keep your mouth shut about my party, and I won't spill about Jessie." I was too stunned to speak. Brad could hear Jessie. That meant Jessie wasn't just in my head. While I stood there frozen, Brad's friends swarmed around him, slapping high fives and yelling stuff like, "Dude, kegger at your place? Count me in." Finally, I snapped out of it. "Jake would never let you pull this off," I shot back. "He'd shut it down before you even got started." Brad just rolled his eyes. "Who do you think's hooking me up with the beer? Jake S. stealing a keg from work." My stomach dropped. No way, he wouldn't. Then it hit me. "How much are you paying him?" $100, Brad said, grinning. "Half of what he still owes on that Camaro he's obsessed with. Of course, Jake would sell his soul for that car." I scrambled for another angle. "David's gonna rat you out." Brad smirked. "Not if he wants to keep his teeth. And if you try to stop me, Mom's gonna get the full Jessie story." That's when I punched him. No thought, just pure instinct. My fist connected with his stomach before I even realized I'd swung. The whole thing lasted maybe 2 seconds. Coach Gillard yanked us apart before Brad could even swing back. "Shake it off," he snapped, pushing me aside as he knelt to help Brad, who was wheezing like he'd run a marathon. So I shook it off, right over to Father D., who stood in the courtyard directing workers as they draped twinkling lights around a towering palm. "What do you want me to say, Susanna?" he sighed after I'd spilled everything. "Some folks just pick up on things faster than others." "Sure, but Brad." I kept my voice low, eyeing the grounds crew bustling around us, prepping for the Big Father Sarah celebration this weekend, right after Brad's infamous hot tub disaster. Father D shrugged. "You didn't really think you could hide Jessie indefinitely, did you? Your family was going to find out eventually." Maybe. But how did Brad, of all people, figure it out when sharper minds like Andy or my mom were completely oblivious? Then again, Max, our family dog, had always known. He'd steer clear of my room whenever Jessie was around. Honestly, Brad and Max had similar brain power, though Max had the edge. Mrs. Elkins finally cut us loose with a warning. "Let's not make this detention a yearly tradition, Susanna." "Couldn't agree more," I muttered, grabbing my bag and booking it outside. The California sun blazed overhead, turning the sky into a searing blue canvas, the Pacific's white waves crashing against Carmel Beach in the distance. My usual rides, Adam in his zippy green Beetle or Brad in Jake's hand-me-down Land Rover, were long gone. Now I faced a 2-mile trek uphill to Pinecrest Drive. I'd barely reached the school gates when my so-called rescuer rolled up. No white horse, just a silver BMW with the top down. Of course. "Hop in," Paul called as I waited to cross the street. "I'll drop you off." "No thanks," I said, breezy. "I'd rather walk." "Suze," he drummed his fingers on the wheel, "just get in." Hard pass. Lesson learned, no more rides from guys who'd literally tried to murder me, especially not Paul, whose attempt had left me with nightmares. "I'm good." Paul chuckled, shaking his head like I was the one being ridiculous. Really something else," he said, shaking his head. "Thanks," I replied as the walk signal lit up. I stepped off the curb, familiar with this intersection. I didn't need an escort. Yet there Paul was, crawling along in his car at a snail's pace, keeping up with me. "Planning to tail me the whole way?" I asked as we began the climb up Carmel's steep hills. Lucky for him, this road wasn't busy at this hour, or his creeping pace would have earned him more than a few honks from impatient locals. "Yep," Paul answered, rolling down his window. "Unless you stop being stubborn and just get in." "Pass," I said, keeping my stride. The afternoon sun was relentless, and my sweater was starting to cling uncomfortably. Still, no way was I accepting a ride from him. I stuck to the shoulder, avoiding suspicious-looking foliage. Poison oak had been my nemesis long before Paul showed up. My arms ached under the weight of critical theory since Plato, which seemed to grow denser with every step. "You're making a mistake," Paul called, his silver car inching along like some predatory reptile. "We're not so different, you and me." "I really hope that's not the case," I said, keeping my tone cool. "Sometimes politeness cuts deeper than anger, trust me, it works." Paul smirked. "Sorry to break it to you, but it's true. So what Father Dominic say? Warn you about me? Tell you I'm full of lies?" "Actually, no," I said, spotting a patch of buttercups and sidestepping carefully. "He thinks I should give you a chance." Paul's grip on the wheel tightened. "Seriously, he said that?" "Yep," I confirmed. "He believes you're here to connect with fellow mediators, thinks it's our duty to help you, find redemption. But you don't buy that." His stare was intense, not like he needed to watch the road at this speed. I wiped a trickle of sweat from my neck, wishing I hadn't lost my hair clip. "Father Dominic's the kindest person I know. He lives to help people, me. I'm not that generous." "He truly thinks people are inherently good, that kindness begets kindness." "You don't agree, I'm guessing?" Paul asked. "Father Dom's living in a fantasy," I said, keeping my eyes fixed ahead as we climbed the hill. My pulse wasn't racing from exertion, it was him. "But since I don't want to disappoint him, I'll keep my real thoughts about you to myself, like how you're a manipulative sociopath." "A sociopath?" Paul looked weirdly pleased. "Now that's new. I've been called plenty of things, but never that." "Not a compliment," I snapped. "I know," he said, grinning. "That's why it's fun. You're something else, you know that." "Whatever," I muttered, annoyed that even my insults bounced right off him. "Just answer me one thing. Go ahead. That night we met up there." I gestured toward the sky. "How'd you get there? No one sent you, right?" His grin widened. "Nope, and no one sent you either." That stopped me cold. "Wait, are you saying I can just go there whenever?" "There's a lot you don't know yet, Suze," he said, his voice smooth. "Things you haven't even imagined, things I could teach you." I wasn't fooled. Charming, sure, dangerous, absolutely. "Right," I said, hoping he couldn't hear my heart hammering. "I'm sure." "Father Dom's a good man," Paul went on, "but he's just a middleman. You're different." We reached the top of the hill, and the shade of the towering pines was a relief. If only ditching Paul was as easy as escaping the sun. "So my whole life, everyone tells me one thing, and now you show up with some new theory, and I'm just supposed to buy it." "Yep. Because you're so reliable," I shot back, faking confidence. "Because I'm all you've got," he corrected. I glared. "That's not exactly reassuring. Or should I remind you that the last time we met, you abandoned me in what felt like the underworld?" Paul rolled his eyes again, like he always did. "It wasn't the underworld. You would have figured it out eventually." What about Jesse? My pulse pounded in my ears because this was the real issue, not what he'd done to me, but what he'd done to Jesse, and the fear that he might try it again. Paul sighed, sounding annoyed. I already apologized for that, and everything worked out fine, didn't it? Like I said, Suze, you're stronger than you realize. You just need someone to guide you, someone who actually knows what they're doing, not some old priest obsessed with long-dead saints. Right, I shot back. And I guess you think you're the perfect mentor, like some kind of supernatural sensei. Something like that. We turned onto Pinecrest Drive, my house sitting high above Carmel Valley. My bedroom faced the ocean, and at night, the sea fog drifted in through the open windows, curling over the sill like ghostly fingers. The place was historic, built in the 1850s as a boarding house, and unlike most old houses around here, it wasn't known for being haunted. Paul draped his arm over the empty seat beside him. Come on, Suze, dinner tonight my treat. I'll tell you things about yourself that no one else knows. Thanks, I said, stepping onto the pine-covered lawn, relief washing over me. Surviving an encounter with Paul without being thrown into another dimension was a win. But no thanks, see you tomorrow. I didn't wait for his reply, just walked up the driveway, ignoring him calling after me. Inside, my stepfather was in the kitchen, grilling me about my day while he cooked. After giving him the bare minimum, I grabbed an apple and a soda and headed upstairs. When I opened my bedroom door, Jesse was waiting on the windowsill. He looked up as I walked in. Hey, he said. I didn't tell him about Paul. There were a lot of things I hadn't told Jesse yet. Maybe someday. But not today. I knew exactly how things would play out if I told Jesse. He'd charge straight into some dramatic showdown, and the only outcome would be another exorcism. Probably his. And honestly, I couldn't handle that. Not again. So I kept Paul's unexpected enrollment at Mission Academy to myself. Things between Jesse and me were already tense, sure, but that didn't mean I was ready to lose him. How was school? Jesse asked, his voice casual. Fine, I replied, careful not to say more. One wrong word, and I might spill everything about Paul. Besides, these days, silence was safer. The less we talked, the fewer chances I had to ramble nervously. Something I'd noticed kept Jesse from vanishing mid-conversation, which he'd been doing a lot lately with a quick apology whenever things got too quiet. But my chatter didn't exactly inspire him to open up. He'd been distant. Too distant. Ever since that kiss. Guys. 1 minute they're kissing you like you're the only person in the world, and the next, they act like you're invisible. 3 weeks ago, Jesse had pulled me close, his lips sending sparks straight down my spine. I'd melted against him, convinced this was it, the moment I could finally confess everything. The love I'd carried since the day I walked into my new bedroom and found a ghost lounging there like he owned the place. Sure, he'd been dead for over a century, but to me, he was as real as anyone. That's the problem with being a mediator. Ghosts don't feel any less alive. And Jesse, with those dark eyes, that messy black hair, the way he refused to call me anything but Susanna, like he was the only one who truly saw me, how was I supposed not fall for him? But after that kiss, nothing, just apologies and avoidance. I'd tried to play it cool, letting him know I was more than okay with what happened. Maybe too okay. Now I wondered if he thought I was desperate. Back in his day, women probably slapped guys for less. But then again, most guys back then didn't look like Jesse. It's still wild to think someone could despise a guy enough to kill him. But that's how Jesse became the ghost lingering in my bedroom, the same room where he was murdered a century and a half ago. Given the whole undead situation, I figured recapping my day wasn't exactly a priority. Instead, I tossed him critical theory since Plato and said, "Father Dominic sends his regards." Jesse lit up like I'd handed him concert tickets. Of course, the guy I'm crazy about would rather dissect literary criticism than make out. As he flipped through the pages, I dumped my backpack onto the bed, already drowning in homework on the first day back. Junior year was shaping up to be a real thrill. Between Paul Slater lurking around and trigonometry, what more could a girl ask for? I should have mentioned Paul right then. Just dropped it casually like, "Oh, hey, remember that guy whose face you almost rearranged? Yeah, he's in my homeroom now." Maybe if I'd played it cool, it wouldn't have been a thing. Sure, Jesse had every reason to loathe the guy, but I could have skipped the whole possible demon offspring angle. I mean, the dude wears a fossil watch. How evil could he be? But just as I worked up the nerve to bring it up, Brad screeched from downstairs that dinner was ready. Family meals were non-negotiable in Andy's world, so I had to abandon Jesse, who barely noticed, and face the chaos downstairs. A real tragedy, considering the alternative, more quality time with my ghostly crush. Dinner was steak fajitas, Andy's specialty. I'll admit, Mom scored big with a guy who could cook like a pro and fix a leaky faucet. After years of takeout, it was a major upgrade. The trade-off, 3 stepbrothers. Brad greeted me with a burped loser as I walked in. "Says the guy who still can't parallel park," I shot back. Andy sent him to fetch sour cream, and Mom ruffled my hair like I was still 12. Some things never change. "Did your first day back go okay?" Out of everyone in the world, my mom is the only one who gets to call me Susie. Thankfully, I drilled that into my stepbrothers' heads long ago, so they didn't even crack a smile when she said it. Telling her the truth about my day wasn't an option. She has no clue her daughter bridges the gap between the living and the dead. She doesn't know Paul exists, let alone that he once tried to end me and Jesse. Completely off her radar. To her, I'm just a late bloomer, a quiet girl who'll eventually figure things out and have guys lining up. Kind of ironic for a local news journalist, honestly. Sometimes I wish I could live in her blissfully unaware world. "It was fine," I answered, keeping it vague. Brad dropped the sour cream on the table and smirked. "Won't be saying that tomorrow." Mom settled into her chair, smoothing out one of Andy's fancy cloth napkins, because apparently paper is for peasants. "Oh," she asked, eyebrows lifting. "Why that?" "Student council nominations," Brad said, sliding back into his seat. "And Suze is getting dethroned as VP." I spread my own napkin over my lap, ignoring Max, the Ackerman's drooling dog, who had his usual spot under the table, hoping for scraps. "No clue what he's talking about," I said, meeting Mom's questioning look. Brad feigned surprise. "Kelly didn't hunt you down after school?" "Right, because I'd been stuck in detention, something he knew full well. He was just enjoying this." "Nope," I said. "What's the deal?" "Kel already picked her running mate. That new guy, Paul whatever." Brad shrugged, his wrestler's neck making the motion look like a boulder shifting. "Guess your VP era is officially over." Mom frowned. "Susie, you didn't know." I shrugged. "It's whatever, never saw myself as the student government type anyway." That didn't sit well with her. She pressed her lips together. "I don't like this. Some new boy swooping in and taking your spot. That's not right." David, ever the philosopher, chimed in. "Fair or not, it's survival of the fittest." Paul's built like a tank, nature's favorite. I couldn't help noticing how every girl around Paul Slater suddenly starts fussing with their hair or adjusting their clothes. My mom caught that last remark and gave me an amused look. "Well, Susie," she asked lightly, "does Paul have that effect on you too?" "Not even close," I snapped. Brad let out another obnoxious burp, then added, "Yeah, right." I shot him a death glare. "Brad, I swear I can't stand Paul Slater." "Could have fooled me," he shot back. "The way you two were talking in the breezeway this morning, total preening situation." "You're imagining things," I snapped, my face heating up. "Oh, please," Brad said, rolling his eyes. "Either you were fixing your hair for 10 minutes straight or you got your hand stuck in a moose disaster." "Both of you stop," Mom cut in before I could argue further. "I don't like him," I repeated, just in case Brad had selective hearing. "Actually, I hate him," Mom sighed. Susie, that's not a nice thing to say. You barely know the boy. Brad, ever the helpful one, chimed in. Oh, she knows him. They met over the summer at Pebble Beach. My stomach dropped. How do you know that? Paul mentioned it, Brad said with a shrug. My mind raced, knowing Paul, he'd probably spill everything just to mess with me. Trying to sound casual, I asked, what else did he say? Brad smirked. Relax, Suze, not everything's about you. Andy walked in from the kitchen, balancing two trays, one piled with sizzling steak strips, the other with warm tortillas. Brad, he warned, then paused, frowning at the empty seat beside me. Where's Jake? We all exchanged blank looks. None of us had even noticed he was missing. But the way Andy said it, we all knew Jake was in deep trouble when he got home. Maybe he got stuck in a long line at registration, Mom suggested gently. It's his first week of college. Things are probably chaotic. Andy scowled. He promised he'd be here. A phone call would have been nice. Mom nudged him toward the table. The food's getting cold. Let's eat before it's ruined. Andy sat down, but his appetite was clearly gone. He was just getting started, he said, launching into the same speech we'd heard 100 times. When someone puts effort into making a nice meal, the least everyone can do is show up on time. The front door banged open, cutting him off. Jake's voice carried from the entryway, Relax, I made it. He knew exactly how to push his dad's buttons. My mom shot Andy a knowing glance as we passed around bowls of salad and shredded cheese. That look said everything. I knew this would happen. Jake strolled into the dining room, taking his sweet time. Sorry, he said, tossing his keys onto the counter. Got stuck at the bookstore. The checkout line was insane. Mom's smirk widened. Andy just grumbled, You're pushing it. Sit down and eat. Then, turning to Brad, he added, Hand me the salsa. But Jake didn't move. He stood there, one hand in his pocket, the other still clutching his keys. Listen, he said. We all looked up, bracing for the usual excuse, another scheduling mix-up at work, another reason he couldn't stay. That usually set Andy off, but instead Jake said, I brought someone with me. Hope that's cool. Andy, who'd rather cram a dozen extra guests around the table than have one of us miss dinner, just waved a hand. Sure, plenty to go around. Grab another plate. Jake headed to the kitchen while his friend finally wandered in, lingering in the doorway like he'd been distracted by the gallery of family photos covering the walls. Unfortunately, this wasn't some mystery girl we could rib Jake about later. Neil Jankow, as he introduced himself, was different. Polished, for one, not the usual sun-bleached, board-short-wearing type Jake usually hung with. His jeans actually fit, no sagging, no boxers peeking out. That alone made him stand out. Not that he was some heartthrob, far from it. Wiry, pale, with shaggy blonde hair, he looked more like a guy who spent too much time indoors. Still, Mom clearly approved. He was painfully polite, calling her ma'am. Thanks for having me, ma'am, though he'd accidentally credited her with the cooking, which was all Andy. Nobody corrected him. A chair was pulled out and Neil sat, eating carefully but with real gratitude. Turned out he was in Jake's English Lit class. New detail, Neil hesitated before sitting, glancing at the bookshelf in the corner, classics mostly. Maybe he recognized a few titles. Neil, like Jake, was starting his freshman year at NOCL, what everyone called Northern California State College. Both guys were locals, with Neil's family living in the valley. His dad owned a handful of restaurants around town, a couple of which I'd actually been to. Just like Jake, Neil hadn't settled on a major yet, but he was already loving college way more than high school, mostly because he'd cleverly scheduled 0 morning classes. That meant sleeping in or, if he woke up early enough, catching some waves at Carmel Beach before his first lecture. By the time dinner ended, I had a ton of questions about Neil, but one thing in particular nagged at me, something I doubted anyone else had even noticed. Still, I felt like I deserved an explanation. Not that I could bring it up with so many people around. That was the real issue. The room was packed, not just with family at the table, but with the guy who'd slipped in and stood behind Neil the whole meal, arms crossed, glaring like he wanted to set the place on fire. This guy was nothing like Neil. He was all sharp angles and confidence, with dark hair and a jawline that could cut glass. Even in his preppy polo and khakis, it was obvious he spent serious time at the gym. Those arms didn't sculpt themselves. But the biggest difference, Neil was very much alive. The guy behind him, not so much. Classic Jake, bringing home a ghost for dinner. Neil seemed completely unaware of the specter looming over him, and my family didn't notice either, except for Max. The second Neil sat down, Max bolted to the living room with a whimper, earning an eye roll from Andy. "That dog's losing it," he muttered. I wanted to follow Max. Badly. But unlike him, I couldn't just bail without raising eyebrows. Besides, as a mediator, dodging the dead isn't really an option, even when I really, really wish it were. So there I was, forcing down steak fajitas while a very irritated ghost stared me down. Perfect end to an already lousy day. And honestly, could I blame him for looking ticked off? He was dead-eye, had no clue how he'd lost his soul, but it must have happened fast because he still seemed awkward about being a ghost. Every time someone asked for something near him, he'd reach for it, only to watch helplessly as a living person grabbed it first. His frustration was obvious, though most of his anger seemed directed at Neil. Each bite of fajita, every chip dipped in guac, made the dead guy's jaw tighten. His hands clenched whenever Neil politely answered my mom's questions with a soft, "Yes, ma'am," or "No, ma'am." It was unsettling, even for me, and I'm no stranger to ghosts staring me down. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I jumped up to clear the plates, even though Brad was supposed to handle cleanup. He just stared, half-chewed steak visible in his open mouth, but didn't argue, probably worried I'd snap out of my sudden helpfulness. Or maybe he thought I was buttering him up so he wouldn't rat me out about my late-night visitor. Either way, my dish duty hustle signaled the end of dinner, and soon everyone wandered outside to admire Andy's beloved hot tub, which he'd been shoving in people's faces since they arrived. Alone in the kitchen, I seized my chance. The ghost hovered by the sliding door, watching the others. With a soapy hand, I yanked his sleeve. He spun around, eyes wide with shock and anger. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to notice him. "Hey," I whispered, nodding toward the deck where they debated chlorine levels and Andy's flan. "We need to talk." You can see me," he stammered. "Obviously," I said. He blinked, then glanced outside. "But they can't." "Nope." "Why?" he demanded. "Why you and not them?" "Because I'm a mediator." His confusion deepened. "A what?" Before I could explain, my mom slid the door open, shivering. "BRR, it's chilly out there once the sun dips." "Need help with those dishes, Susie?" "All good," I chirped, flashing her a smile. "You sure?" I thought Brad was supposed to handle the dishes tonight. "Don't worry about it," I said, forcing a smile I knew she'd see right through. She did. "Susie, sweetheart," Mom pressed, leaning against the doorframe. "You're not upset about what Brad said, are you? About that other boy getting the vice president nomination instead of you?" I shot a quick glance at Ghost Boy, who looked about as thrilled with this interruption as I felt. Not exactly the best time for a heart-to-heart. "Nah, Mom, it's fine. Honestly, I'm cool with it." And I meant it. Not being stuck in student government this year meant more free time, though I wasn't sure what I'd do with it, especially since Jessie seemed determined to keep things strictly platonic. But hey, a girl could dream. Mom lingered, her worry practically radiating. "Susie, you know colleges want to see involvement. You've got less than 2 years left. You'll be gone before we know it." Seriously. She had no clue about Jessie, yet somehow she was still managing to keep us apart, not that Jessie needed any help in that department. "Fine, Mom," I muttered, shifting under Ghost Boy's unimpressed stare. "I'll sign up for swim team. Happy now, You'll get to chauffeur me to dawn practices every morning." She gave me a flat look. "Nice try. You'd never risk your hair to chlorine." With that, she vanished into the living room, leaving me alone with my spectral guest. I exhaled. "Okay, where were we?" Ghost Boy just stared, still baffled. "I can't believe you actually see me," he said, voice tinged with disbelief. "People usually look right through me." "Yeah," I said, tossing the dish towel aside. "Because you're dead, the real question is, why are you still here?" He flinched at my bluntness. Tough. My patience was running thin. "Wait," he said, eyeing me warily. "Who are you again?" "Suze." "I'm a mediator." "A what?" "Mediator. I help the dead move on, next life, afterlife, whatever. What's your name?" He hesitated. "Craig." "All right, Craig, here's the deal. You're not supposed to be haunting my kitchen. You need to move on." "Move on where?" "You'll figure that out when you get there." I said, "The real issue isn't your destination. It's why you're still stuck here in the first place." Craig blinked, his hazel eyes widening. "Wait, you're saying this isn't the end?" I couldn't help but chuckle. "Seriously, you think the afterlife is just some random house on Pinecrest Drive?" He shrugged, his broad frame shifting uncomfortably. "I don't know. When I woke up, I had no clue where to go. Nobody could even see me. I walked into the living room and my mom was just sobbing, like uncontrollably. It freaked me out." I softened my tone. "It happens. Most people move on right away, next life, cosmic judgment, whatever. But you're lingering. That means something's keeping you here." Just then, the group inspecting Andy's hot tub, soon to be a disaster zone after Brad's infamous parties, finished up and wandered back inside. I motioned for Craig to follow me upstairs where we wouldn't be interrupted. Well, not by the living, at least. Jesse barely glanced up from critical theory since Plato as we barged into my room. "Dios mio," he muttered, clearly annoyed. His cat, Spike, arched his back before recognizing me and my latest spectral tag-along and flopped back down. "Jesse, meet Craig. Craig Jesse," I said. "He's dead too. You'll have plenty in common." Craig, however, was too busy staring at Jesse's outfit, black boots, snug trousers, and a billowy white shirt straight out of the 1800s to process introductions. He sank onto my bed, or at least tried to, given his lack of solid form. "Are you a pirate?" Jesse's expression darkened. "No." I bit back a laugh, ignoring Jesse's glare. "Focus, Craig. Why are you still here? There's gotta be a reason." Craig finally tore his eyes away from Jesse. "I wish I knew," he admitted. "Wait, you're telling me I wasn't supposed to die?" Craig crossed his arms, his voice thick with disbelief. I took a slow breath. Honestly, everyone says this, like death some kind of scheduling error. I've had centenarians whine about getting shortchanged. But hey, I'm the mediator here, so I keep it professional. Not that I get a paycheck, unless you count cosmic brownie points. "I get why you'd feel that way," I said carefully. "Was it unexpected? No health issues or anything?" Craig scoffed. "Are you serious? I bench 240, run 5 miles daily, made varsity crew at UC Santa Cruz. Plus, I swept the Monterey Bay Regatta 3 years straight." I blinked. No wonder his polo shirt hugged his shoulders like it was tailored for a magazine shoot. "So, freak accident." "Total fluke," he snapped, jabbing a finger into my mattress. 1 second, smooth sailing next, a rogue wave flipped us. Sail pinned me underwater before I could react. I hesitated. "You couldn't swim free." He dragged a hand through his hair, frustration rolling off him. "That's the kicker. I was a state champ in freestyle, district record holder. Drowning, that wasn't in the script." "Look, it sucks," I admitted. "But you'll find peace. It just takes time." Craig's laugh was razor sharp. "Peace? Buddy, I'm a ghost. My highlight reel just got deleted mid-scene." Jesse materialized beside me, arms crossed. "She means peace comes when you stop clinging to what was." "Oh, like you're one to talk," Craig shot back. "How long's your RSVP to the afterlife been pending?" "Century and counting." Jesse's jaw tightened. He had no rebuttal. None of us knew why he was still here. Father Dominic swore he'd move on eventually, warned me not to get too comfortable with a guy who'd outlasted the invention of light bulbs. Too late. Whatever anchored Jessie to this world, I hoped it held. Selfish, maybe, but some attachments. Worth keeping. Jessia's circumstances are pretty unusual, I told Craig, keeping my voice steady partly to calm him down but mostly for Jessie's sake. I doubt your situation is anywhere near as messy. Damn right, Craig shot back, because I shouldn't even be here in the first place. Got it, I said, and I'll do everything I can to help you move on to whatever comes next. Craig's frown deepened, the same one he did all night while eyeing Jake's friend Neil. No, he snapped. You're not listening. I mean, I shouldn't be here, as in I wasn't supposed to die. I nodded. I'd heard this before plenty of times. Nobody wants to wake up and realize they're dead. Nobody. It's tough, I admitted. But you'll get used to it, I promise. Once we figure out what's keeping you stuck. You still don't get it, Craig cut in, shaking his head. What's keeping me here is that I'm not the one who was supposed to die. I hesitated. Even if that's true, there's nothing I can do about it. Craig shot up from the bed, his anger filling the room. What do you mean nothing? Then what's the point of you? You said you could help. You said you were the mediator. I am, I said, glancing at Jessie, who looked just as stunned as I felt. But I don't decide who lives or dies. That's not my call. Craig's face twisted in disgust. Well, thanks for nothing, he muttered, storming toward the door. Honestly, good riddance. The guy had an attitude bigger than his swimmer's shoulders. If he didn't want help, fine by me, but Jessie wasn't having it. You, he said, his voice sharp enough to freeze Craig mid-step. Apologize to her. Craig turned slowly, glaring. No way, he spat. A second later, he wasn't walking anywhere. Jessie had him pinned against the door, arm twisted behind his back at an angle that definitely didn't feel great. Apologize, Jessie growled. She's trying to help you. You don't treat people like that. Wow. For someone who acts like he can't stand me, Jessie sure gets protective when others are rude. Fine, Craig grunted, face pressed into the wood. I'm sorry. Dead or not, pain still registers. The soul remembers. Better, Jessie said, letting him go. Craig slumped against the door, looking thoroughly humbled even though Craig had been a real piece of work. I couldn't help but pity him. His day had been way worse than mine. Dying tends to ruin your afternoon. It's just not right, Craig groaned, rubbing his sore arm where Jessie had nearly snapped it. I was the one who should have made it, not Neil. I raised an eyebrow. Wait, Neil was with you on the boat. It was a catamaran, Craig snapped, then quickly toned it down with a wary glance at Jessie. Yeah, obviously he was there. So he was your sailing buddy. Craig gave me a look like I'd just asked if Neil could fly. Are you kidding? If he knew the first thing about sailing, we wouldn't have capsized. He's the one who should have drowned. What were my parents thinking, telling me to take him out there? Well, joke S on them. I took him, and now I'm dead while he's still breathing. Now it made sense why Neil had been so quiet at dinner. Losing a brother would do that. The guy couldn't even swim a lap without needing an inhaler, Craig ranted. How the hell did he survive 10-foot waves for 7 hours? How? I had no answer for that. Just like I had no idea how to break it to Craig that his bitterness was the reason he was still stuck here. Maybe you got knocked out, I offered weakly. Yeah, and... Craig shot back, confirming my guess. Meanwhile, Neil, who couldn't do a single pull-up, somehow held on me, state champ swimmer. I drown, total garbage luck. That's why I'm haunting this place while he's downstairs stuffing his face. Jessie's expression darkened. Do you intend to take his life in return, since you believe yours was stolen? I cringed. Craig looked genuinely shocked. Clearly, revenge hadn't crossed his mind. No way, he said, though he hesitated before adding, wait, could I even do that? Like if I wanted to? No, I said firmly, just as Jessie muttered, yes, but your soul would pay the price, of course. Craig ignored me. Sweet, he murmured, studying his hands. No murder, I cut in. Not happening, not here. Craig blinked at me like I'd lost it. I'm not gonna kill him, he said. I crossed my arms. Then what's stopping you from moving on? Was there something you never got to say to him? Want me to pass it along? Craig stared at me like I'd suggested he hug a cactus. Neil, he repeated, incredulous. He got to be joking. I have zero interest in talking to Neil. That guy's a total joke. Seriously, look who he's choosing to hang out with, your brother, of all people. Even though I wasn't exactly a fan of my stepbrothers, except for David, obviously, that didn't mean I'd just sit there while someone trash-talked them right in front of me. Especially Jake, who was pretty harmless overall. What's your problem with my brother? I snapped. Well, stepbrother, technically. Craig shrugged. No offense to him, really, but come on. Neil's just a freshman, easy to influence, but I warned him. If you want to get anywhere at Nokel, you've got to roll with the surfers. That was it. I'd had enough of Craig Jankow. Got it, I said, heading for my bedroom door. Nice meeting you, Craig. I'll be in touch. And I meant it. Tracking him down wouldn't be hard. Just follow Neil, and Craig would be lurking somewhere nearby. Craig perked up. Wait, so you're gonna bring me back? Nope, I said. More like figuring out why you're still stuck here instead of where you belong. Right, Craig muttered. Alive. Jessie, who's never been big on the whole reincarnation thing like I am, chimed in. She means heaven or hell. Craig, who'd been eyeing Jessie nervously ever since the door incident, looked downright spooked. Oh, he said, his eyebrows shooting up. Oh, or your next life, I added, shooting Jessie a look. We don't really know, do we, Jessie? Jessie, who'd stood when I did. Because let's be real, he's all about old-school manners, answered reluctantly. No, we don't. Craig hesitated at the door, glancing back at us. Well, see you around, I guess. Then, with an awkward glance at Jessie, he added, and, sorry about the pirate comment. Seriously. Jessie just grunted, it's fine. The second Craig was gone, Jessie turned on me. Susanna, that kid is bad news. You need to hand him over to Father Dominic. I flopped onto the window seat, right where Jessie had been sitting. Spike, my traitorous cat, hissed at me, his way of reminding me he's Team Jessie, even though I'm the one who buys his food. He'll be okay, Jessie, I said. We'll keep tabs on him. The guy just died, give him a minute to adjust. Jessie shook his head, his dark eyes intense. He's going to try to kill his brother. Yeah, I shot back, now that you've put the idea in his head. Call Father Dominic, Jessie insisted, grabbing the phone. He needs to warn the brother. Whoa, slow down, I said. I can handle this without dragging Father Dom into it. Jessie gave me a doubtful look. And let me tell you, even when he's skeptical, he's still the most ridiculously good-looking guy I've ever seen. He's not exactly magazine cover material. There's that pale scar slicing through his right eyebrow, and let's just say his wardrobe choices wouldn't win any fashion awards. But from his cropped dark hair down to those worn-in riding boots, every inch of him screams confidence, all 6 feet of solid, very much alive muscle. Too bad he only sees me as a friend. Maybe if I'd known what I was doing that time we kissed. But let's be real, my dating history isn't exactly packed with experience. Regular guys don't exactly line up for me, though it's not like I'm hideous. With the right makeup and a good hair day, I clean up just fine. It's hard to focus on dating when you're constantly fielding requests from the afterlife. You should call him, Jessie insisted, shoving the phone toward me again. Trust me, Carita, there's more to Craig than you think. My breath caught, not because of what he said about Craig, but because of that word, Carita. He hadn't called me that since the day we kissed. I'd missed it so much I'd actually looked it up in Brad's old Spanish dictionary. Dearest one. Sweetheart. Not exactly the kind of thing you call your buddy. I kept my face neutral, though, pretending I hadn't noticed the slip. You're being paranoid, I said. Craig would never hurt his brother. He's just confused right now. And even if he did have some twisted plan, since when can't I handle a little ghostly drama? I deal with vengeful spirits all the time. Jessie slammed the phone down so hard I winced. That was before, he snapped. The room had gone dark except for the soft glow of my vanity light, casting shadows across his face. Before what? I asked, even though I already knew. Before he showed up, Jessie said, biting out the word. Don't lie to me, Susanna. You haven't slept through the night since. I hear you tossing, mumbling in your sleep. I didn't need him to say the name. We both knew who he meant. It's nothing, I lied. Okay, fine, maybe I'm still shaken up from that place. Yeah, I have nightmares. But I'll get past it, Jessie. I'm moving on, I said, trying to sound convincing. Jessie crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. You're not bulletproof, Susanna, no matter how much you pretend to be. I blinked, caught off guard that he'd even noticed. Part of me wondered if he kept his distance because I didn't fit some fragile damsel-in-distress ideal. Maybe that one impulsive kiss was all I'd ever get. But the second he called me out, my defenses shot up. I'm fine, I snapped. No way was I telling him that seeing Paul Slater had nearly stopped my heart. Like I said, I'm over it. And even if I wasn't, it wouldn't stop me from helping Craig. Or Neil. He wasn't buying it. Let Father Dominic handle this, Jessie said, nodding toward the door Craig had just walked through. You're not ready. It's too much too soon. I clenched my fists, wishing I could casually drop Paul's name like it meant nothing, except it did and always would. Your concern, I said, layering on the sarcasm to mask how much I was lying to him to myself, is touching but unnecessary. I can deal with Craig Janko, Jessie. His frown deepened, irritation flashing in his dark eyes. If we ever actually got together, he'd need a crash course in modern relationships, maybe a marathon of therapy talk instead of whatever outdated ideals he clung to. Fine, he said, voice low. I'll tell Father Dominic myself. Great, I shot back. Knock yourself out. What I really wanted to say was, why are you doing this? I know you feel something. I felt it when you kissed me. So why pull away? But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, he just clenched his jaw and vanished, leaving me alone with my frustration and a half-finished trig assignment. By the next day, I was still forcing myself to focus, but it was impossible. Nothing ruins concentration faster than a stubborn, know-it-all ghost who thinks he's in charge of your life-I was supposed to be writing a 500-word essay on the Civil War, a punishment handed down by Mr. Walden after the chaos of student government nominations that morning. The whole junior class got stuck with it, thanks to a few of us acting up. Specifically, thanks to me. When Cece, my so-called best friend, decided to nominate me for vice president right after Kelly put Paul Slater's name forward, I kicked her under the desk hard enough to make her yelp. What is wrong with you? She hissed, rubbing her shin. I don't want to run, I snapped back. Drop it. The class erupted into laughter, which only stopped when Mr. Walden chucked a piece of chalk at the door and threatened us with extra homework. Too late, though. Adam seconded Cece's nomination, and just like that, I was officially in the race against Paul, the new guy with the easy charm and a face that had half the girls in class swooning. Not that I cared. Between mediating ghostly disputes, failing at trigonometry, and dealing with the whole dead-almost boyfriend situation, the last thing I needed was a pointless election. To make matters worse, Paul had the nerve to wink at me in homeroom like we were in on some secret. As if the morning hadn't been bad enough already. And then there were the shoes. My beautiful, torturous Jimmy Choos, bought on sale over the summer, were shredding my feet. The nurse's Band-Aids did nothing. Every step felt like walking on hot coals. If I ever met Jimmy Choo, I'd have a few choice words for him. So there I was in the computer lab, sneakers abandoned under the desk, trying to focus on trig instead of my overdue essay, when a familiar voice whispered right in my ear, "Miss me, Suze." I didn't even flinch. "Leave me alone," I said, sounding way calmer than I felt. "Come on, Simon," Paul said, grabbing a chair and spinning it around before sitting backward on it. "You don't actually hate me as much as you act like you do." "I wouldn't be so sure," I muttered, tapping my pencil against my notebook, not out of annoyance but nerves. "Look, Paul, I've got a ton of work. He yanked the notebook away before I could finish. Who's Craig Jankow? My stomach dropped when I saw the name scribbled in the margin. No one, I said quickly. Paul smirked. Good. I was worried he'd stolen my spot in your heart. Does Jesse know about this mystery guy? I shot him a glare, praying he'd mistake my panic for anger and leave. No such luck. I hoped he didn't notice how fast my pulse was racing, or worse, misinterpret it. Paul was way too aware of how good he looked, especially in those fitted black jeans and that olive green polo that made his tan stand out. Across the room, Debbie Mancuso and a few others kept sneaking glances at him before pretending to focus on their screens. They probably thought it was unfair he was talking to me, the girl who didn't follow Kelly Prescott's rules or swoon over Brad Ackerman. If only they knew how badly I wished Paul would disappear. Craig, I whispered, is dead. Paul just grinned. Perfect. That's your type, right? You're impossible, I snapped, lunging for my notebook, but he held it just out of reach. He scanned my worksheet, looking thoughtful. Dead boyfriends do have perks, he mused. No awkward family dinners, no meeting the parents since they can't see him anyway. He's not my boyfriend, I hissed, furious that I was even explaining myself to him. He showed up at my place yesterday and I'm trying to help him. Paul rolled his eyes. Oh great, another lost cause you and Father Dom are adopting. It's my job to help spirits move on, I shot back. Who decided that? He asked. I faltered. It just is. What else am I supposed to do? Paul grabbed a pencil from a nearby desk and started solving my math problems. Seems unfair we got stuck with this mediator gig without so much as a job description or benefits package. I never asked to be a mediator. Did you? Obviously not, I shot back, though I'd complained about it to Father Dominic in almost those exact words more times than I could count. Paul leaned in, his gaze sharp. How do you even know what your job is supposed to be? You think you're helping the dead move on so they'll leave you alone, but who decided that was your responsibility? Who explained how it actually works? I hesitated. No one had, really. My dad had hinted at it, sure. Then there was that psychic Gina dragged me to back home, and of course, Father Dom. But none of them had given me a clear answer. Paul smirked, reading my silence. Exactly. But what if I told you I found something, an ancient text from the earliest days of writing that describes mediators? Not by that name, but it lays out exactly what we're meant to do and how. I stared at him, torn between skepticism and curiosity. He sounded so sure of himself. If you really have proof, I said slowly, then show me. Gladly, he said, looking way too pleased. Come by my place after school. I bolted up so fast my chair nearly toppled over. No, I snapped, clutching my books like a shield. Not happening. Paul didn't even flinch. Figured you'd say that. You want answers, but not enough to risk your precious image. It's not my image I'm worried about, I hissed, keeping my voice low as a few heads turned our way. It's my life, or did you forget you already tried to kill me once? He rolled his eyes. Here we go again, Suze, you could have left any time, you chose to stay. But Jesse couldn't, I shot back, my hands shaking. Because of you. Paul shrugged, unfazed. Okay, fine, not Jesse, but come on, he's already dead. Why are you so worked up? You're disgusting, I spat, though my voice wavered. I turned to leave, but he called after me. Suze, forgetting something? I glared over my shoulder. Yeah, I forgot to tell you to never talk to me again. He just grinned. Not what I meant. Are those your shoes under the desk? Paul gestured toward my designer heels, which I'd nearly forgotten in my rush to storm out. Like Sister Margaret wouldn't have lost it if she'd spotted me padding through the halls barefoot. Oh, I muttered, annoyed my grand exit had been ruined. Right. I trudged back to grab them, shoving my feet into the shoes with more force than necessary. Before you vanish, Cinderella, Paul added, still grinning, you might want this too. He slid my completed trig assignment across the desk, neat, precise, and probably flawless. Thanks, I said, snatching the notebook, my irritation fading into awkwardness. Why did I keep snapping at him? Sure, he'd once tried to end me and Jesse, or at least I'd thought so. But he insisted I was wrong. What if I was? What if Paul wasn't the villain I'd painted him to be? What if he was just human? About this Craig situation, Paul continued. I dropped into the chair beside him, half because Mrs. Henderson was glaring from her desk. Students weren't supposed to bounce around the computer lab like ping-pong balls, and half because, fine, I wanted to hear what he'd say next. Curiosity was edging out my wariness. Seriously, thanks, I said, but I've got it handled. Paul leaned back. What's this ghost really after? Same as all of them, I sighed. A second shot at life. Obviously, he said, but what else? No clue yet. He's hung up on his little brother, thinks he should have died instead. Jesse thinks. I bit my tongue. Bringing up Jesse was a mistake, but Paul just raised an eyebrow. Jesse thinks what? Too late now. Jesse thinks Craig might try to kill his brother for revenge. Paul didn't even blink. Which would accomplish exactly nothing, but if he wanted to become his brother, now that's interesting. Become him? I frowned. How? Soul transference. Steal his brother's body. I nearly dropped my books. It was way too early for this. Between the sleepless night and Paul's casual horror movie pitch, my brain was running on fumes. Steal his body, I repeated, my voice flat. The words hung in the air, absurd and terrifying. My grip tightened on the notebook in my lap. This was not how I'd planned my Tuesday. My fingers dug into the worn armrests of my desk chair, the foam padding giving way under my grip. What do you mean by that? Paul tilted his head, one eyebrow lifting. No clue, huh? Guess the priest hasn't covered everything in your little lessons. Shocking. Seriously, I snapped, my pulse quickening. How is that even possible? People don't just take over other people. He leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his neck. Told you there were things you didn't know, and I could fill in the gaps if you'd let me. I studied him, torn between suspicion and annoying curiosity. This wasn't some cheesy sci-fi plot, but what if it wasn't a lie? What if there was actually a way to I needed answers, more than I'd ever needed anything? My palms were damp against the chair, but I barely noticed. Fine, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll come by after school, but only if you explain all of it. Something flickered in his eyes, sharp, predatory, gone before I could place it. Then he gave me a slow, deliberate smile. Deal. 3 o'clock at the front gate, don't be late. Chapter 8, I had zero intention of showing up. Let's be real, I've been lured into enough bad decisions to know better. Past meetups had left me duct-taped to furniture, stranded in alternate realities, or worse, forced into fashion disasters. No way was I falling for it again. Except I did. Because what if this was real? Actual proof about mediators, about bodies being hijacked. No amount of creepy fog-filled nightmares was going to stop me. I'd spent years questioning what I was, why I was like this. Father Dom might have been content with vague answers, but I was. If that meant facing the guy who starred in my worst dreams, fine, worth the risk. Adam and Cece definitely didn't agree. The final bell rang, and I was halfway down the hall when Cece and Adam caught up with me. My feet were killing me in these stupid shoes, but Cece barely glanced at my awkward limp, too busy flipping through the notebook she'd scribbled in during biology. Okay, she announced. First stop is Safeway for markers, glitter, and poster board. Adam, does your mom still have those wooden rods from her weird Amish furniture phase? We could use them for the vote for Sue's signs. I winced as I tried to keep pace. Hey, guys, can we work on this at your place? Cece cut in. I'd offer mine, but you know my sisters. They'd probably turn our campaign posters into a skate park. Listen, I said, I really appreciate this, but I can't go with you. I've got plans. Adam and Cece shared a look. Oh, Cece smirked. Meeting up with your ghost boyfriend, are we? Not exactly. Just then, Paul strolled past, eyeing my hobbling with amusement. I'll pull the car around to the side exit, he said smoothly. Save you the walk. He disappeared down the hall before I could respond. Adam gasped dramatically. Consorting with the opposition, he cried. The betrayal, Cece's jaw dropped. You're seriously going somewhere with him. She tossed her sleek blonde hair. What about Jesse? It's not like that, I muttered. We're just working on something. Working on what? Cece adjusted her glasses, eyes narrowing. Since when do you have a project with Paul Slater? I shifted uncomfortably, my shoes feeling like torture devices. It's not for school, more like church stuff. The second the word left my mouth, I knew I'd messed up. Cece didn't care about being ditched. She'd probably enjoy the alone time with Adam, but she wasn't letting me off that easy. Church. She snapped. Suze, you're Jewish, or did you forget? Sort of, I hedged. I mean, my dad was, but my mom, a sharp honk cut me off. Paul's car idled just beyond the school gate. That's him. Gotta run. I bolted, well, as fast as someone in agony could, and practically collapsed into the passenger seat, relieved to finally sit down. But as Paul flashed that movie star grin behind his shades, part of me wondered if I was walking straight into disaster. Sure, he looked like every girl's fantasy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever answers I was about to get, I wasn't going to like them. Paul stepped out of the driver's seat and circled the car to open my door. You coming, Suze? He asked when I hesitated, my fingers still hovering over the seatbelt buckle. I swallowed hard, staring up at the massive glass house. Despite the Toyota parked outside, the place had an eerie, abandoned vibe. Paul sighed dramatically. Relax, he said, rolling his eyes. I'm not plotting anything sinister. Strictly business today, fun can wait. I forced a casual smile, hoping he wouldn't catch on that guys don't usually talk to me like that. But the truth, it threw me off. Paul wasn't even my type, yet every time he dropped one of those lines, like I was something worth noticing, it sent an unexpected ripple through me. Not disgust, not annoyance, just something, and that was the problem. Here's the thing, I'm head over heels for someone else. Jesse might not be returning the sentiment, but that doesn't mean I'm suddenly switching teams to Team Paul, no matter how effortlessly he pulls off those sunglasses. I finally climbed out of the car. Smart move, he said, shutting the door behind me with a sharp click that felt way too final. Barefoot, my designer heels dangling from one hand and my bag in the other, I followed him up the concrete steps to the sleek glass entrance. Inside, the air was crisp, almost too quiet, no trace of the ocean waves crashing just beyond the cliff. The decor screamed modern luxury, all sharp edges, cold metal, and spotless glass. The kind of place that probably turned into an icebox the second the coastal fog rolled in. Paul guided me up a spiral staircase to the kitchen, where every appliance looked like it belonged in a spaceship. Drink, he offered, swinging open a glass cabinet stocked with top-shelf liquor. Hilarious, I deadpanned. Water's fine, where's your grandfather? Down the hall, he said, grabbing 2 fancy bottled waters from the fridge. He caught my skeptical glance and smirked. Feel free to check. I'd hate for you to think I'm luring you into some elaborate trap. I took the bait. Not because I fully trusted him, let's be real, I didn't, but because I wasn't leaving without answers. And luckily, it seemed I wouldn't have to curious about the muffled noise. I trailed it through a sleek glass corridor until I reached a spacious room where a flat-screen TV played loudly. An elderly man slumped in a high-tech wheelchair, his attention glued to the screen, while a younger guy in blue scrubs flipped through a magazine on a stiff-looking designer chair. The nurse glanced up as I hesitated in the doorway and gave a casual nod. Hey there, he said. Hey, I replied, stepping inside cautiously. The room had an impressive view, probably the best in the house, but the sterile hospital bed, Roman IV drip, and rows of framed black and white photos gave it an eerie museum-like feel. The images showed people dressed in 1940s fashion, frozen in time. Hi, Mr. Slater, I said, trying to sound friendly. I'm Suze Simon. No response. The old man didn't even blink, his watery eyes fixed on the game's show. His wrinkled skin was dotted with age spots, and a thin line of drool escaped his slack mouth. The nurse dabbed it away with a cloth. "See, Mr. Slater." The nice girl said hello. "You gonna say hi back?" Still nothing. Then Paul strolled in behind me and clapped his hands. "What's up, Pops? Another thrilling day of daytime TV." Mr. Slater ignored him too. The nurse forced a smile. "We had a lovely afternoon. Took a stroll by the pool and picked some lemons from the garden." "Fantastic," Paul deadpanned before grabbing my wrist and pulling me toward the door. Honestly, I didn't resist. Something about the whole scene unsettled me more than Paul ever could. "Bye, Mr. Slater," I muttered, not expecting an answer. Once we were in the hallway, I lowered my voice. "Is it Alzheimer's?" "Nah," Paul said, tossing me a bottle of water. "Doctors can't pin it down. He's sharp when he feels like it." "Really?" I doubted that. Most people with full mental faculties don't drool like a Saint Bernard. Maybe he's just really old. Paul let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, that must be it." Without another word, he flung open a door to his bedroom, a massive space with a king-sized bed, sleek metal furniture, and a spotless glass desk holding the latest high-end laptop. The whole place screamed expensive minimalism, like a magazine spread for rich people who hate clutter. Paul's room was nothing like mine. No scattered magazines, forgotten socks, or half-finished snacks cluttering the space. It felt more like a sleek, impersonal penthouse suite, all sharp angles and cold surfaces. "It's here," Paul said, perching on the edge of his massive bed. I swallowed hard, unease prickling down my spine, not just from the way he tapped the empty spot beside him, but because the room itself was eerily devoid of color. The only vivid hues came from outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the endless blue sky and the deep, restless ocean below. "Yeah, sure," I muttered. Paul stopped patting the mattress and reached under the bed instead, pulling out a clear storage bin, the kind people use for off-season clothes. He lifted the lid, revealing a stack of carefully preserved newspaper clippings. "Take a look," he said, unfolding a brittle old article from the London Times dated June 18, 1952. The headline screamed, "Archaeologists' Theory Mocked by Experts," above a photo of a man standing in front of an ancient Egyptian tomb covered in hieroglyphs. "Dr. Oliver Slasky," Paul explained, pointing at the man in the picture, "spent years translating these inscriptions. He believed there was a secret group of Egyptian shamans who could move between the world of the living and the dead without actually dying. They called them shifters, guides who helped souls cross over so they wouldn't get stuck wandering the earth." I hesitated before sitting beside him, but curiosity won out. Leaning in, my hair brushed against the yellowed paper as I studied the photo. "Shifters," I repeated, my lips suddenly numb, like I'd been out in freezing wind. He didn't mean shifters. He meant mediators. Paul shook his head. "No, but I was already certain." My chest tightened, the air thin in my lungs. "No," I whispered. "He was talking about us. You'd feel the same way if you'd spent your entire life questioning why you didn't fit in, only to stumble onto the answer, or at least a major piece of the puzzle." "That's it, Paul," I said, pointing at the figure in the hieroglyph. "The hermit card in tarot shows an old man with a lantern, just like this. It keeps appearing in my readings. The hermit guides souls to the afterlife, and even though this guy isn't old, the symbolism is identical. This has to mean mediators." My pulse hammered in my chest. This wasn't just a hunch, it was proof. Actual historical evidence that people like me existed. I could barely contain my excitement to share this with Father Dominic. "It has to." Paul pulled another set of aged papers from the acrylic case. "But mediators weren't the only ones, Suze," he said, his voice low. "Slaska's research mentions regular mediums, sure, but also something else, shifters." He leaned closer, the brittle pages of the thesis barely separating us. That's what we are. A cold shiver shot through me, raising goosebumps along my arms. Something about the word, or maybe the way Paul said it, hit me like an electric jolt. No, I protested, my voice tight. I'm just a mediator. If I were a shifter, I wouldn't have needed an exorcism. You didn't, he cut in, his tone steady while mine wavered. You could have gotten there and back just by picturing it. You still can. I stared at him. His eyes gleamed unnervingly in the dim light, sharp as a predator's. Was he serious or just messing with me? Knowing him, it could be either. Not a chance, I shot back, even though part of me had known the truth all along. That's why I was here. Try it, he pressed. Visualize it. You remember what it looks like. Oh, I remembered. Thanks to him, I'd been stuck there for what felt like an eternity. And now it haunted my dreams every night. My pulse pounded in my ears as I sprinted down the shadowy hallway, tendrils of mist curling around my ankles before dissolving into nothing. Did Paul honestly believe I'd ever willingly step foot in that place again? No way, I snapped. Hard pass, Paul's grin turned knowing. Suze Simon, scared. That's a first. His eyes gleamed under the dim light. You usually act like fear is some kind of virus you're magically immune to. I'm not scared, I lied, crossing my arms. I just don't feel like, what's the word? Oh, right, shifting right now. Ask me again later. Right now, I want to talk about that other thing you brought up. The whole body swapping thing, soul jumping or whatever. His smirk widened. Knew that to catch your interest. I knew exactly what he was hinting at or thought I did. My face burned, but I kept my voice steady. It's just curiosity. Is it even real? I tapped the wrinkled thesis pages between us. Does Dr. Slasky actually mention it? Maybe, Paul said, pressing his palm over the papers before I could flip through them. Paul, I huffed, tugging at the sheets. Come on, I just want to know. Have you ever tried it? Does it actually work? Could someone like Craig really hijack his brother's body? But Paul didn't budge. This isn't about Craig, though, is it? His stare locked onto mine, all traces of amusement gone. Suze, when are you going to face it? That's when I realized how close he was, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. I tried to lean back, but his hand shot out and gripped my wrist. His fingers were warm, his tan a stark contrast against my skin. Jessie's gone, he said quietly, but you don't have to be. I'm not. I didn't get to finish because Paul leaned in and kissed me. I won't sugarcoat it, it was a really good kiss. The kind that made my knees weak and my toes curl in my shoes. Not that I kissed him back. Okay, maybe a little. But only because, well, Paul had skills, and it had been way too long since anyone had looked at me like that, even if it was him. The worst part, for a second I couldn't remember why I hated him, which was ridiculous. Except when his hands tangled in my hair and his mouth moved against mine, logic kind of took a backseat. Hot guys didn't just sweep me off my feet every day. Hell, it had only happened a couple times in my life. And right then, with his heartbeat thudding against mine, it was hard to care about anything else when Paul Slater kissed me. I was completely blindsided by how much I didn't hate it. This was the same guy who, not too long ago, had me convinced he was dangerous, except now he was insisting I'd never been at risk. But I knew better. The real danger wasn't physical. It was how easily I could lose myself in someone who was all wrong for me, especially when the guy I actually cared about seemed light years away. Because that's what Paul's kiss did. It made me forget every reason I should push him away. And that was the problem. I wasn't in love with Paul. The guy I did love, well, for starters, he was a ghost. And secondly, he wasn't exactly lining up to sweep me off my feet. But that didn't mean I could just jump at the next attractive distraction that came along. A girl's gotta have standards, right? Like not throwing herself at someone just because he knows how to kiss, even if, in the moment, I might have kissed him back. Just a little. Pulling away should have been simple. except his grip on my wrist was unbreakable, and thanks to my momentary lapse in judgment, he had me pinned. His weight pressed me into the bed, probably ruining Dr. Slaska's research notes, not to mention my favorite skirt. Having 180 pounds of teenage boy on top of you isn't exactly comfortable when it's not the guy you actually want there, or when you're trying to stay loyal to someone who might not even want you back. I finally twisted my face free, gasping, "Get off me." Paul's voice was low, way too confident. "Come on, Suze," he said, and I hated how it sent a shiver through me. "Don't pretend you haven't thought about this." "Actually," I shot back, "I really haven't." But he wasn't listening. His mouth trailed down my neck, grazing my ear. "Is this about student council?" he murmured. "Because I couldn't care less about being VP." "Yeah, right, like that was the issue." "If you're that upset about it, just tell me and I'll back out of the election," Paul said, his grip still tight on my wrist as I tried to pull away. His lips brushed against my neck, sending an unsettling heat through my skin. "This isn't about student council," I snapped, twisting free. "And don't even start with Jesse." Paul groaned, his whole body tensing. "Come on, Suze, the guy's gone. What kind of future do you think you two could possibly have? You're going to grow up, he's stuck forever at whatever age he was when he died. Prom, movies, who's picking you up in his ghostly Camaro?" My face burned, not just from anger, but because he wasn't wrong. Worse, he was throwing it in my face like he'd won some argument I hadn't even been having. "You don't know anything about how I feel," I shot back. "Oh, really?" His smirk was infuriating. "Then why were you kissing me like that if you're so hung up on him?" That did it. Rage flared hot in my chest. "Get off me," I growled, "or I swear I'll gouge your eye out." He laughed right up until my thumb jabbed the corner of his eye. "Damn it, Suze," he yelped, rolling away. I didn't stick around to hear the rest. I grabbed my shoes and bag, bolting out of his room before he could say another word. Down the hall, Grandpa Slater was still glued to Family Feud, oblivious as I flew past. The stairs loomed ahead, freedom just beyond the front door. Then, out of nowhere, a massive figure blocked my path. A ghost, of course. Because why not? Biker Bob, complete with leather vest, tattoos, and a mustache that belonged in a Wild West saloon, folded his arms. "Mr. Slater ain't done talkin' to you," he rumbled. I barely had time to process before Paul's voice echoed from the top of the stairs. "Suze, wait." I glared up at him. "Minions, seriously," he winced, rubbing his eye. "Just hear me out." But I was already calculating my next move. Ghosts, ex-boyfriends, and a very ticked-off mediator. This was turning into the worst night ever. "EGOT creepy minions doing your dirty work. What exactly are you?" "I already told you," Paul replied. "I'm a shifter, just like you, and you're blowing this way out of proportion. Can we just talk, Suze? I promise I won't try anything." "Oh, that sounds familiar," I shot back. When Biker Bob lurched toward me, I didn't hesitate. I swung my designer heel straight at his skull. Jimmy Choo definitely didn't intend his shoes for combat, but hey, it worked like a charm. Bob went down, stunned, and I bolted past him, flinging the door open and sprinting outside. I was halfway down the concrete steps when Paul's voice chased after me. "Suze, come on, I didn't mean what I said about Jesse." I spun around at the bottom of the driveway and flipped him off. His eye wasn't hanging out like I'd hoped, just a little red. "At least let me drive you home," he pleaded. "No thanks," I snapped, struggling to slide my shoes back on. "I'd rather walk." "Suze, it's 5 miles. "Don't ever talk to me again," I said, turning away before he could see the truth. If he tried to kiss me one more time, I might actually let him. He didn't follow. I made it to Scenic Drive, my pride barely intact, before finally ripping off those stupid heels. "Ow, ow, ow," I hissed, hobbling barefoot down the road. The ocean breeze did nothing to soothe my throbbing feet. Tossing them into the Pacific was tempting, but even at a discount, those shoes cost a fortune. So I clutched them in one hand, carefully picking my way along the shoulder, scanning for broken glass and poison ivy. Paul wasn't wrong. 5 miles was brutal. Worse, the nearest payphone was a solid mile away. Who even used payphones anymore? This night couldn't get any worse. I considered knocking on one of the massive houses near Paul's place to ask for a phone, but the idea made me cringe. Who wants to explain their situation to a stranger? A payphone would do. I just had to find one. The only hitch in my plan was the blazing sun overhead. Don't get me wrong, it was a gorgeous September afternoon, clear skies, not a cloud in sight. But that was the issue. The heat radiated off the pavement, scorching my bare feet. The ocean breeze might have made the air feel bearable, but the asphalt didn't care. What had felt warm at first was now searing, like a griddle left on high. I could have tried flagging down a passing car, but honestly, my luck would have landed me in the passenger seat of some deranged stranger's vehicle. No thanks. So I kept walking, wincing with every step, my mind racing faster than my feet. Why had I even gone to Paul's house? Sure, the stuff about shifters had been intriguing, even the idea of soul transference, if such a thing existed. But dwelling on that led to darker thoughts, like how easily I'd let myself get distracted by someone who wasn't Jesse. Maybe it was just the sting of rejection making me desperate for any kind of attention, even from someone I didn't actually like. And I didn't like Paul. The nightmares I'd been having about him were proof enough. Yet there I was, replaying the way my pulse had spiked when he kissed me, betraying every logical thought in my head. Focusing on that was better than the burning pain in my soles, at least. Each step was punishment, a reminder of my own bad judgment. Paul had dangled information I wanted, but I should have known better. With him, there was always an angle, and this time it had everything to do with me. What really got to me was that for a brief moment, I hadn't minded at all. In fact, I'd kind of enjoyed it. Suze, what were you thinking? This was bad, really bad. I was in deep trouble. After what felt like an eternity of hobbling in agony, I finally spotted my salvation, a cozy beachfront cafe. I dragged myself toward it, my feet screaming with every step, mentally running through my list of who I could call without inviting a disaster. Mom, out of the question. She'd grill me for details and probably ground me for life for even being at some guy's place she didn't know. Jake, nope, same problem, too many questions. Brad, forget it. He'd probably laugh and hang up, given how much he despised me. That left Adam. He was the only one who'd not only come get me without hesitation, but would actually enjoy playing the hero, especially when he heard how Paul had crossed the line. Adam was smart enough to know picking a fight with Paul would end badly. Of course, I'd leave out the part where I'd flirted right back. The Sea Breeze Cafe, my aching feet's destination, was one of those trendy spots with outdoor seating and valet service. Too late for lunch, too early for dinner, the place was empty except for staff prepping for the evening crowd. As I shuffled up, a waiter was scribbling the daily specials on a chalkboard. "Hey," I chirped, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't barefoot and borderline hysterical. He barely glanced at me before returning to his task. "We don't seat until 6, he said flatly. "Got it," I replied. "Just need to use your phone if you have one." "Inside," he muttered, then gave me a once-over. No shoes, no service. I held up my designer heels. "Technically, I have shoes." He rolled his eyes and went back to his chalkboard. Honestly, why do some people go out of their way to be difficult? It's like they wake up and choose rudeness. Inside, the cafe was blissfully cool. I inched toward the restroom and phone signs, my feet throbbing with every step. Halfway there, a familiar voice called my name. My stomach flipped. Paul. Had he followed me to apologize? Or maybe pick up where we left off if he thought I was going to forgive him, much less kiss him again. He was dead wrong. Well, okay, maybe the kissing part wasn't entirely off the table, no. Absolutely not. I turned slowly, my voice tight with control. "I told you," I said. "I never want to see you again." The words died in my throat. It wasn't Paul Slater behind me. It was Neil Jankow, Jake's college buddy, Craig's brother, standing by the bar with a clipboard, looking even thinner than I remembered. Now, knowing what he'd been through, sadder too. "Susan," he said uncertainly. "Oh, hey, it is you. I wasn't sure." I stared at him, then at the clipboard, then at the bartender beside him holding an identical one. Then it clicked. Neil had mentioned his dad owning restaurants in Carmel. This must be one of them. "Neil," I managed. "Yeah, it's me, Suze. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," he said, his eyes flicking to my filthy bare feet. "Are you all right?" The worry in his voice was genuine. Here was a guy who barely knew me, misremembered my name, and yet cared more than people who should have, like Paul, and yeah, fine, Jesse too. The contrast made my throat tighten. "I'm fine," I lied. Then, like a dam breaking, it all spilled out, minus the ghost mediator stuff, obviously. I didn't even know why. One second I was standing there, the next I was rambling. And then he tried to grab me, so I jammed my thumb in his eye and ran, but my shoes were killing me, so I ditched them, and I don't have a phone, and this was the first place I found with a payphone. Before I could finish, Neil was guiding me to a stool, patting my shoulder awkwardly. "Hey, it's cool," he said, clearly out of his depth. He kept offering things, lemonade, tiramisu, like that would fix it. "Lemonade's good," I muttered, exhausted. "Got it," Neil said, nodding to the bartender. "Jorge, lemonade ASAP." The bartender poured me a glass, eyeing me like I might start reciting bad slam poetry. Great, just the vibe I was going for. I took a sip, cold, sharp, grounding. Setting it down, I met Neil's worried gaze. "Thanks, I'm better." "You're really sweet," I said, watching Neil fidget under the compliment. He scratched the back of his neck, avoiding eye contact. Thanks. Listen, I've got my phone if you need it." "Maybe call someone. Jake, maybe." Jake, my stomach twisted at the name. I shook my head fast, my voice dropping to a whisper. "No, not him, he wouldn't get it." Neil's expression shifted from awkward to full-blown nervous. It was obvious he just wanted me gone, and honestly, I didn't blame him. "Okay, what about your mom?" He tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. Another sharp headshake. "No way. I don't want her knowing how dumb I was tonight." Behind the bar, Jorge cleared his throat. "Neil, we're wrapping up here. You can head out if you want." The unspoken "and take her with you" hung in the air. The place was dead, but he clearly wasn't thrilled about me being there when the night crowd rolled in. Neil winced, looking me over like I was some kind of stray cat, one with matted hair, salt-crusted skin, and feet that looked like they'd lost a fight with a cheese grater. His hesitation was almost flattering. Who knew I could inspire such caution just by existing? With a sigh, he snapped his phone shut and stuffed it back into his khakis. "I guess I could drive you home if you want." His offer wasn't exactly dripping with enthusiasm, but relief flooded through me anyway. "Seriously, that would be amazing," I blurted, maybe a little too eagerly because his ears turned bright red. He muttered something about closing duties and hurried off. I didn't care. A ride home meant no awkward calls, no more limping down the sidewalk, just sweet, sweet escape. My feet were a disaster. The bandages had given up entirely, and the raw blisters gleamed under the dim bar lights. I didn't dare check the soles. At this point, they were just numb. "Wow," a voice drawled beside me. "That's some next-level foot trauma. You should sue your salon." I didn't bother turning. "Hey, Craig." Neil and Jorge were still deep in conversation, oblivious. Craig slid onto the stool next to me, flipping a matchbook between his fingers. "So this is how you mediators operate. Destroy your feet, then bum rides off dead guys' brothers." "Not my usual strategy," I muttered. Craig smirked. "Could have fooled me. Solid technique, though." "You're really knocking it out of the park with this investigation, huh?" I exhaled sharply. After the week I'd had, the last thing I needed was a ghost cracking jokes. But maybe I had it coming. "How's the afterlife treating you?" I asked, forcing a casual tone. "Just peachy," Craig replied. "Absolute blast." "You'll adjust," I said, remembering Jessie. Oh, I'm sure, Craig muttered, his eyes locked on Neil. I should have picked up on it then, but my brain was too busy juggling my own mess, not to mention the fact that my feet had gone completely numb. Neil passed his clipboard to Jorge, shook his hand, and turned to me. "Ready, Susan?" he asked. I didn't bother correcting him about my name, just nodded and slid off the bar stool, checking to make sure my feet actually touched the ground. "Really did a number on yourself," Craig remarked. Unlike his brother, though, he actually helped, sliding an arm around my waist to steer me toward the door where Neil stood jingling his keys. I must have looked ridiculous, half leaning on empty air because Neil frowned. Susan, you sure you don't want to swing by the first?" "I'm good," I lied. "Sure you are," Craig snorted in my ear. Somehow we made it to Neil's car, a used BMW convertible, nothing like Paul's pristine model. "That's my car," Craig yelped. Honestly, I'd have reacted the same way. Jake would have thrown a fit for hours. Craig managed to shove me into the passenger seat before climbing into the back. Still clueless, I figured he just wanted company. Neil cranked the engine and Kylie Minogue's voice blared from the speakers. "He's ruining my car with this trash," Craig groaned. "I like her," I said too fast. Neil glanced over. "You say something?" "Nothing." Silence. Neil wasn't much for small talk. He pulled out of the Sea Mist Cafe lot, heading down Scenic Drive toward downtown Carmel. The ocean air whipped through the open roof, sharp with salt. For a second, I almost forgot my feet didn't work. Almost driving through downtown Carmel by the Sea was always a hassle, packed with clueless tourists wandering nameless streets with no traffic lights to guide them. But today, the usual chaos took a backseat to the real problem, a vengeful ghost riding shotgun. At first, I didn't pick up on the danger. I was too focused on playing peacemaker between the two brothers, unaware just how deep their rift ran. The salty ocean air whipped through the open windows as we sped down Scenic Drive, the sun's earlier heat giving way to a refreshing breeze. "Neil," I started, keeping my tone casual, "I heard about what happened with your brother. I'm really sorry." His grip on the steering wheel tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "Thanks." Most people would drop it there, but mediators don't have that luxury. That must have been brutal, stranded out there for so long. "Catamaran," both brothers corrected in unison, Craig with a scoff, Neil with quiet patience. "Right, catamaran," I said. 7 hours, wasn't it? That's a long time in freezing water." Neil nodded. "Yeah," I pressed on. "And Craig was the athlete, right? The one who always came out on top." "Damn right," Craig cut in from the back. "All-state swimmer." I shot him a look. This wasn't his moment. Neil's voice was barely audible over the hum of the engine. "Swimming, sailing, you name it, he was the best." Craig grinned, leaning forward. "Told you, he knows it should have been him." Ignoring him, I kept my focus on Neil. "People might be shocked you made it and he didn't, but your parents, they're just glad you're alive." Neil's laugh was hollow. "No, they're not. They wanted Craig. Everyone did." Craig crossed his arms, smug. "See, even he knows." The tension in the car thickened, the unspoken truth hanging heavier than the ocean air. Some wounds don't heal, they just fester. Even Neil agrees, he should be the one here instead of me. My focus shifted from the brother we'd lost to the one still standing beside me. "Neil, you can't seriously believe that." "Why not?" He shrugged, his voice flat. "It's the truth." "It's not," I insisted. "There's a reason you're still here and Craig isn't." "Yeah," Craig cut in, his tone dripping with bitterness. "Somebody screwed up, majorly." "No," I said, shaking my head. "It was an accident, Neil. Craig hit his head, just bad luck, nothing you could have changed." For a second, Neil looked like a man stepping into sunlight after years of darkness, hesitant to trust it. "You really think so?" he asked, hope flickering in his voice. "Absolutely," I said. "That's all there was to it." But while Neil seemed lighter, Craig only grew darker. "What kind of garbage is this?" he snapped. "He should have been the one to die, not me." Guess fate had other plans, I muttered, low enough that only Craig could hear. Big mistake, not because it wasn't true, but because Craig couldn't stand hearing it. If I'm stuck being dead, he snarled, then he should be too. Before I could react, Craig lunged for the wheel. We were creeping down a charming little street, lined with boutique shops and slow-moving tourists. The kind of place my mom would adore and I'd rather avoid. Traffic was barely moving, an RV ahead of us, a tour bus beyond that. But when Craig grabbed the wheel and slammed his ghostly foot over Neil's on the gas, everything lurched forward. Neil didn't even realize what was happening, just felt the car surge. If he hadn't stomped the brake, if I hadn't thrown myself into the fight and wrenched the wheel back, we'd have plowed straight into that RV, or worse, the crowd of sightseers on the sidewalk. "What the hell is your problem?" I shouted at Craig. Neil, pale and trembling, stammered, "I didn't do it, I swear. The wheel it moved on its own." But I wasn't listening to him. My rage was fixed on Craig, who looked just as shocked as Neil, staring at his hands like they'd betrayed him. "Don't you ever pull that again," I snarled. "Ever, got it?" "I didn't mean to," Neil choked out. With a broken whimper, Craig flickered, then vanished, just like that. Gone, leaving us to clean up the chaos. Luckily, the damage wasn't as bad as it could have been. People were definitely staring at us after we'd come to a sudden stop in the middle of the road, shouting our heads off. Thankfully, no one got hurt, not us, not anyone else. We hadn't even bumped the RV in front of us. A moment later, it started moving again, and we followed, our pulses racing. "I should probably get this car checked out," Neil muttered, gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles turned pale. "Might need an oil change or something." "Or something," I agreed, my heartbeat still pounding in my ears. "Definitely a good call. Maybe stick to the bus for a while. Or at least until I figure out how to deal with your brother," I thought but didn't say. Neil just nodded weakly. "Yeah, the bus might be fine." By the time he dropped me off, I was still rattled, and it had been one hell of a day. Getting kissed like that, then nearly dying. Not exactly your average Tuesday. I wanted to say something to Neil, something to shake him out of his guilt over being the one who survived. And maybe warn him about his brother, who'd vanished looking angrier than ever. But all that came out was a pathetic, "Well, thanks for the ride." Seriously, thanks for the ride. No wonder I wasn't exactly drowning in awards for emotional support. Neil barely seemed to hear me anyway. He just looked eager to get me out of the car. Can't blame him. What college guy wants to be seen with a disheveled high school girl limping around with blistered feet? The second I shut the door, he peeled out of my driveway, pine trees whipping past, like he couldn't care less about the near-death experience we just had. Or maybe he was just that desperate to get away from me. The walk to my front door felt endless. I moved like I was 100 years old, dragging myself up each porch step. "I'm home," I called half-heartedly. Only Max came trotting over, sniffing for snacks before losing interest and wandering off. Then came the real challenge, the stairs to my room. Each step was torture. Normally, I'd take them 2 at a time, but today, it felt like an hour passed before I reached the top. I knew I'd have a lot to explain once anyone, saw me. But the one person I really didn't want to face, Jesse. And of course, he'd probably be waiting right there in my room when I finally stumbled through the door. Jesse would never understand why I was at Paul Slater's place to begin with. And how was I supposed to hide the fact that I just kissed another guy? And worse, actually enjoyed it. Standing there with my hand on the doorknob, I convinced myself this was Jesse's fault. If he had shown me even a little affection lately, I wouldn't have kissed Paul back. Not ever. But no, he'd been distant, so here I was, stuck with guilt and sore feet. Of course, I'd never admit that to him. The last thing I wanted was to mention Paul's name at all. I needed a believable excuse, anything but the truth, to explain why my feet were wrecked. And my lips, that was another problem. But when I flung open my bedroom door, relief hit me. No Jesse. Just Spike, perched on the windowsill, grooming himself like nothing was wrong. Thank God. I tossed my bag and shoes aside and beelined for the bathroom. All I cared about was soaking my feet. Maybe if I scrubbed them hard enough, the numbness would fade. I cranked the faucet, plugged the drain, and perched on the tub's edge, wincing as I lowered my feet into the water. At first, it felt amazing, warm, soothing. Then the blisters screamed, and I nearly blacked out from the pain. Gripping the tub's edge, I swore off designer heels forever. Aerosols from now on, no matter how hideous. No shoe was worth this agony. After a few deep breaths, I grabbed a sponge and Cetaphil, scrubbing gently until the last layer of grime washed away. That's when I saw the real damage. My soles were a mess of angry red blisters, some swollen with blood, growing worse by the second. I groaned. It'd be days before I could walk normally, let alone wear shoes again. Just as I was mentally cursing Paul and every luxury shoemaker alive, Jesse's voice cut through the air, sharp with concern. "Carita, what did you do to yourself?" He stood over me, staring at my feet through the clear water. "New shoes," I muttered. It was the best lie I could come up with. Running barefoot from a guy who couldn't take no for an answer wasn't exactly the kind of story I wanted to share with Jesse. The last thing I needed was him going all old-school cowboy justice on someone, though part of me wouldn't have minded seeing that. Still, he'd called me Carita again, which had to mean something. Unless he used that term with everyone, including his sisters and maybe even his abuela. "You did this to yourself on purpose." Jesse stared at my blistered feet like they were some kind of crime scene. "Not exactly," I muttered, scrambling for a believable excuse instead of admitting the truth, that I'd been sneaking around with Paul, making out on his navy blue comforter before things got way too intense. Instead, I launched into a rapid-fire explanation. New shoes, blisters, missed my ride, had to walk home. Pavement was scorching. You know how it goes. Jesse's expression darkened as he sat beside me on the tub's edge. "Let me see." Great. Just what I wanted. The guy I'd been crushing on since day one, inspecting my wrecked feet while completely unaware they were battle scars from fleeing a situation I never should have been in. Then again, shouldn't I be able to hang out with a guy without him assuming it's an open invitation? The whole thing was a mess, and I doubted Jesse, a guy who probably thought courtship involved chaperones and handwritten letters, would get it. With an exaggerated sigh, I yanked my foot from the water. "Happy now, feast your eyes." I braced for disgust or at least a lecture, but Jesse just studied my foot like a doctor assessing a patient. No gasps, no scolding. When he finished, he simply said, "Other one." Same routine, same unnerving calm. Finally, he leaned back and shrugged. "Seen worse." Barely. My jaw dropped. "Where have you seen feet worse than this?" "Sisters," he said, that familiar glint in his dark eyes. Not quite a smirk. Jesse wouldn't dare laugh at me. Right, new shoes always came with the same painful consequences. "I'm never walking again, am I?" I muttered, staring at my battered feet. "You will," Jesse assured me. "Just give it a couple of days. Those blisters look rough. You need butter." Butter. I made a face. "Best thing for burns like these," he insisted. "Yeah, maybe in the Wild West," I shot back. "These days, we use Neosporin. There's some in the cabinet behind you." Jesse sighed but grabbed the tube, carefully smoothing the ointment over my blisters before wrapping my feet in enough band-aids to make them look like modern art. When I tried to stand, it wasn't exactly pain, just this weird, spongy sensation, like stepping on overripe peaches. "Nope, that's enough," Jesse said, scooping me up before I could protest. But instead of the dramatic, slow-motion dip you see in movies, he just dumped me onto the bed like a sack of potatoes. I barely caught myself before rolling off. "Real smooth," I said dryly. He shrugged. "Want a book, homework? I could read to you." He picked up critical theory since Plato with way too much enthusiasm. "Homework's fine," I cut in, grabbing my bag before he could open it. I pretended to focus on my Civil War essay, but really, I was sneaking glances at Jesse, who was stretched out on the window seat, flipping pages. What if he kissed me like Paul had? I mean, I was literally at his mercy. How many guys would love that setup? Most. But not Jesse. When Andy called for dinner, I didn't move. Not because I was enjoying the view, but because standing wasn't happening. Eventually, David came up to investigate, took one look at my mummy feet, and bolted downstairs for Mom. Her sympathy, non-existent. "Serves you right," she scolded. "Who wears new shoes without breaking them in?" She tidied my room, which honestly was already pretty clean since Jesse moved in. Not that he helped. Books everywhere, CDS left out, and don't even get me started on Spike's contributions. "Seriously, Susie," my mom said, eyeing the massive orange tabby stretched across my window seat with clear disapproval. "That cat," Jesse, who discreetly vanished when my mom walked in to give me some privacy, would have been seriously offended to hear his beloved pet talked about like that. "How's our patient doing?" Andy asked, stepping into my room with a tray loaded with perfectly grilled salmon topped with dill and creme fraiche, chilled cucumber soup, and a warm sourdough roll. I had to admit, as much as I'd hated the idea of my mom remarrying, dragging me across the country, and saddling me with 3 stepbrothers, the food almost made up for it. Well, the food and Jesse, at least until recently. "She definitely won't be going to school tomorrow," my mom sighed, shaking her head at the state of my feet. "Andy, look at them. Should we take her to urgent care or something?" Andy crouched down, inspecting Jesse's surprisingly neat bandage job. "I doubt they could do much more," he said. "Seems like she's already handled it pretty well." "You know what I really need?" I cut in. "Magazines, a 6-pack of Diet Coke, and one of those giant Crunch bars." "Don't push your luck," my mom snapped. "You're not spending tomorrow lounging like some dramatic prima donna. I'm calling Mr. Walden tonight to get your assignments. And honestly, Susie, I'm disappointed. You're old enough to know better. You could have called me at the station. I would have picked you up." "Yeah, right." Then she'd have found out I wasn't coming home from school like I'd claimed, but from some guy's place. A guy who employed a dead biker and had, oh, by the way, tried to hit on me while his creepy grandpa drooled in the next room. Moves I'd kind of sort of gone along with. No thanks. As they left, I caught Andy murmuring, "Don't you think you were a little tough on her? She's learned her lesson." But my mom didn't lower her voice. Nope, she made sure I heard every word. No, I wasn't too hard. "She'll be off to college in 2 years, Andy, on her own. If this is the kind of judgment she's using now, I don't even want to think about what's coming. Honestly, maybe we should cancel our trip Friday." "Not a chance," Andy shot back from the stairs. "But no buts," he insisted. "We're going." Their voices faded and Jesse reappeared, smirking. "Not funny," I grumbled. He shrugged. "A little funny." "No way," I said, shaking my head. Jesse flipped open the book Father Dom had given him, a mischievous grin playing on his lips. "I think it's time for a little read-aloud session." "Seriously," I groaned. "Not critical theory since Plato. I'm begging you, this is cruel and unusual punishment. I can't even make a run for it." "Exactly," Jesse said, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Finally, I've got you right where I want you." My breath hitched for a second, just a second, before I realized he wasn't talking about that. He just meant I was trapped, forced to endure his impromptu philosophy lecture. "Hilarious," I deadpanned, trying to play off the flutter in my chest. Then, in a move I never saw coming, he pulled out a copy of Cosmo hidden between the pages of the textbook. "Swiped it from your mom's room," he said casually, tossing it onto my bed. "Figured she wouldn't miss it for a while." I nearly choked. It was the sweetest, the absolute sweetest, thing anyone had done for me in forever. And the fact that it was Jesse, who I'd convinced myself couldn't stand me lately, it threw me completely. Did he not hate me? Could he actually like me? Okay, obviously he liked me. He kept saving my life, after all. But was it that kind of like? Or was this just pity because I was stuck in bed? Honestly, in that moment, I didn't care. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't avoiding me, and that was enough. I flipped open the magazine, grinning at an article titled 7 Ways to Keep a Man Hooked. Normally, I'd roll my eyes, but right then, I didn't even mind that I didn't have a guy to test the advice on. Because maybe, just maybe, whatever weird tension had lingered since that kiss, the one that short-circuited my brain, was finally fading. Maybe things were going back to normal, or better than normal. Maybe Jesse would finally wake up and realize he didn't just need me, he wanted me. A girl could dream, right? And dream I did. For 18 glorious hours, I let myself imagine a world where the guy I was crazy about felt the same way. No thoughts of ghostly drama, no Paul Slater nonsense, no worrying about Craig, because Jesse had happily agreed to keep an eye on him. And it was perfect. No nightmares, no stress. Not exactly like before the kiss, but close enough. Then the phone rang. I answered, only to have Cece's voice blast through the receiver. "Are you kidding me?" she screeched. "You picked today to play hooky. Unbelievable, Suze. We have so much campaigning left to do." It took me a moment to catch on. "Oh, you mean the election? Cece, listen. Kelly's out there handing out candy bars with Vote Prescott Slater printed on them. And what are you doing? According to your brother, you're lounging in bed because of your feet." "Stepbrother," I corrected. "Whatever. Suze, I don't care if you have to wear slippers shaped like marshmallows. Just get over here and work your magic." "Cece," I said, struggling to focus because Jesse was right there, carefully taping bandages onto my blisters. Not exactly helping my concentration. "I'm not even sure I want to be VP," but she wasn't having it. "Suze," she shouted through Adam's phone. I could hear the seagulls squawking in the school courtyard, always scavenging for stray fries, and Adam egging her on in the background. "Kelly Airhead Prescott wins class president every year, but at least when you were VP, there was some dignity. If Paul gets elected, he's just Kelly's puppet. He doesn't care." She wasn't wrong. Paul had zero interest in student government or his family or mediating for that matter. The only thing he took seriously was himself. "Cece, I messed up my feet pretty bad. I can barely walk. Maybe tomorrow." "Tomorrow, the election's Friday. That's one day to turn things around." "Then maybe you should run instead." "Me," she scoffed. "First, I wasn't nominated. Second, let's be real, I don't exactly have your charm. You're like the Jennifer Lawrence of our class. I'm more like a background character in a political drama." "Cece, you're selling yourself short. You know what? Forget it. Let Paul check out my luxury sedan, Slater win. I'm done." I could practically hear her slamming a phone down if she hadn't been using a cell. After a few unanswered hellos, I gave up. "Yeah," I said, hanging up. "She's furious." "Sounded like it," Jesse said. "Who's this mystery opponent that's got her so worried about you losing?" And there it was, the question I'd been dreading. The honest answer was Paul Slater, plain and simple. If I dodged it now, I'd be straight up lying to Jesse. Sure, I'd stretched the truth before, but this was the kind of lie that would blow up in my face later. Little did I know, later meant in about 3 hours, not the week or month I'd hoped for. I figured I'd have time to smooth things over before Jesse caught on. So I shrugged and said, "Just some new guy running against me." It might have worked if David hadn't barged into my room that evening holding a massive bouquet of roses, 24 at least. Suze," he called, pushing the door open. All I saw was a wall of red blooms. "Whoa," I blurted, scrambling up. My first thought was Andy sent them, maybe a get-well gift. "Where do you want these?" David asked, his face hidden behind the flowers. "Window seat's fine," I said, shooting a nervous glance at Jesse, who looked just as stunned as I was. David set the vase down, rearranged a few cushions, and plucked a small card from the leaves. "Here's the note." I tore it open, expecting something sweet from Andy or maybe a sarcastic jab from Father Dom. Instead, my stomach dropped. The bold handwriting was unmistakable. "Forgive me, Suze. With love, Paul." I was beyond screwed. Jessie was right there, reading over my shoulder. And then David, clueless, bless him, chimed in, "That from Paul. Figures, he was grilling me earlier about why you skipped school." I couldn't even look at Jessie. Yeah," I muttered. David, ever the oblivious little brother, pressed on. "What's he apologizing for, that whole VP drama?" I swallowed hard. Dead, woman, walking. I'm not sure." David leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "No offense, but your campaign's tanking. Kelly's passing out candy bars like it's Halloween. If you don't pull out something flashy soon, you might as well kiss the election goodbye." "Appreciate the pep talk, David," I said flatly. "See you later." For a second, he just stared at me, confusion flickering across his face. Then his gaze darted around the room like he'd just realized we weren't alone. His cheeks flushed crimson. Yeah, later," he muttered before bolting out like he'd been fired from a cannon. I swallowed hard and turned toward Jessie. "Look, it's not what you..." But the words died in my throat. Jessie's expression was terrifying, like he was 2 seconds away from committing a felony. The scary part? I couldn't tell if I was the target or if Paul was. "Susanna," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Explain." Honestly, he had no right to be this mad. None. He'd had his shot and blew it. Lucky for him, I wasn't the type to walk away easily. "Jessie," I started, scrambling for the right words. "I was going to tell you." It just slipped my mind. "Tell me what?" The scar above his eyebrow. Turns out it wasn't from some dramatic knife fight, just a run-in with an over-enthusiastic dog, stood out stark white, a dead giveaway. He was furious, as if the venom in his tone wasn't clue enough. "Paul Slater is back in Carmel and you didn't think to mention it." "He's not here to mess with you again," I said quickly. "He knows better than to try anything while I'm around." "I don't care about that," Jessie snapped. "He left you for dead, and now he's at your school. What does Father Dominic say?" I exhaled sharply. "Father Dom thinks we should give him another shot." Jessie didn't let me finish. He was off the bed in an instant, pacing like a caged animal, muttering in Spanish. None of it sounded friendly. "See, this is why I didn't say anything," I said. "I knew you'd lose it." "Lose it." He whipped around, disbelief written all over his face. "Susanna, he tried to kill you." I shook my head, forcing myself to hold his gaze. "He says he didn't. Claims I would have gotten out on my own. Says there's this whole thing about shifters, people who can move through the realm of the dead, not just talk to them like mediators." Instead of looking intrigued, Jessie's expression darkened. "Sounds like you two have been having some very cozy conversations," he said, voice dripping with accusation for a second. I almost thought Jessie's tone had an edge of jealousy to it. But that couldn't be right. He'd made it painfully clear he didn't feel the same way about me as I did about him, so I just shrugged. "What do you expect me to do, Jessie? He's at my school now. I can't exactly pretend he doesn't exist." Not that I had to go out of my way to spend time with him, especially after what happened in his room. But that was one detail I wasn't sharing with Jessie. Besides, he knows things about being a mediator, stuff even Father Dominic might not have heard of. Jessie scoffed. "Oh, I'm sure Slater's thrilled to share all his wisdom with you." "Obviously," I shot back. "We have the same ability. It makes sense he'd want to talk about it." "And yet," Jessie said dryly, "he wasn't exactly generous with his knowledge when it came to other mediators, was he?" I hesitated. He had a point. Why was Paul suddenly so interested in mentoring me? After the way he'd acted, I had my suspicions. Still, it was hard to believe his only motive was that obvious. There were plenty of girls at Mission Academy way more his type, ones who wouldn't give him half the trouble I did, but none of them could see ghosts. "Look," I said, "you're blowing this out of proportion. Yeah, Paul's a total jerk and I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him, but I don't think he's plotting against me. Or you." Jessie let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, I'm not the one he's after, Carita. I'm not the one getting roses." My face warmed as I glanced at the bouquet. Okay, fair. But I think he sent those because he actually feels bad about what happened. I didn't mention the latest incident, of course. Just let Jesse assume I meant the mess from last summer. He's got no one, Jesse. Seriously. I pictured Paul's cold, empty house, all that expensive furniture that looked like it had never been lived in. I think part of his problem is he's just lonely, and he doesn't know how to deal with it because nobody ever showed him how to be, normal. Jesse wasn't buying it. I could pity Paul all I wanted, and part of me did, and not just because he was a shockingly good kisser, but to Jesse, the guy was beyond redemption. Well, he said, flicking one of the deep red petals, for someone who doesn't know how to act human, he's doing a convincing impression of a man in love. I turned as red as the roses. Paul is not in love with me. Trust me, I said, because guys who were actually into someone wouldn't send their friends to block the exits. Right. And even if he did feel that way before, he definitely doesn't now. Jesse raised an eyebrow, nodding at the card in my hand. Oh, really? The fact that he wrote love instead of best wishes or yours truly says otherwise, don't you think? His dark eyes locked onto mine, sharp and searching. And what do you mean, if he were? Susanna, did something happen between you two? Something you're not telling me. I dropped my gaze, letting my hair fall forward to hide the heat creeping up my cheeks. No, I muttered at the comforter. Obviously not. Susanna. When I looked up, he wasn't by the roses anymore. He was right beside my bed, holding my hand in his expression unreadable. His voice softened, nothing like the anger from before. Listen, he said, his thumb brushing lightly over my knuckles. I'm not mad, not at you. If there's anything at all you want to say, you can. I shook my head hard enough for my hair to sting my face. I already told you, nothing happened, end of story. But Jesse didn't let go. Instead, his grip tightened slightly, his rough thumb tracing slow circles on my skin. My breath hitched. Was this it? After weeks of him dodging me, was he finally going to say what I'd been dying to hear? But what if he didn't feel the same? What if that kiss had just been curiosity, a mistake? I'd be crushed, absolutely wrecked. No way. The way he was holding my hand right now, that wasn't just friendship. It couldn't be. He had to feel something. Something was stopping him, but it wasn't indifference. Gathering my courage, I kept my eyes fixed on our tangled fingers. Jesse, I said, voice barely steady, if there's anything you want to tell me, now's the time. Seriously. I could have sworn he was about to speak. I finally lifted my gaze to his, and for a second the air between us crackled, something unspoken, something electric. His lips parted, and I braced myself for whatever came next, then my door flew open. Cece stormed in, Adam on her heels, both of them loaded down with poster boards and irritation. All right, Simon, she snapped. Break S over. We're getting destroyed by Kelly and Paul, and we need a campaign slogan yesterday. Move it. The election was just one day away when Cece barged in without warning. Jesse and I both froze, his hand slipping from mine like he'd touched something hot. Hey, Cece, I managed, forcing a smile. Adam, most people knock first. Cece rolled her eyes. What, afraid we'd catch you making heart eyes at Jesse? Jesse's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared into his hairline. My face burned. Had she really just said that out loud? Shut up, Cece, I muttered, but she was already dumping poster supplies everywhere, markers rolling across the floor. Relax, we knew he wasn't here, she said. No car in the driveway, besides, Brad told us to come up. Of course he did. Adam spotted the roses and let out a low whistle. These from Jesse, dude's got taste, I'll give him that. I didn't dare look at Jesse's reaction. Yeah, I said quickly, avoiding the whole explanation. Listen, now's really not the best time. Whoa. Cece, now crouched on the floor, finally got a good look at my feet. Those are nasty. They look like something off a mountain rescue documentary. Adam leaned in, squinting. Nah, frostbite turns them black. These are burns, like you walked on hot coals or something. Yeah, exactly, I said through gritted teeth. And they hurt, so if you could just— Oh no, Cece cut in. You're not ditching us that easy. We need a campaign slogan. I've already got fifth graders passing out flyers at lunch, don't ask. But they need something catchy. Ideas. My brain was still stuck on Jessie, but Adam, sniffing a Sharpie like it was fine wine, grinned. How about vote Suze? She doesn't suck, Cece groaned. Kelly would sue us for slander. Her dad's a lawyer, remember? Fine, Adam said. Suze rules. That doesn't even rhyme, Cece shot back. Plus, it makes student council sound like a dictatorship. I stole a glance at Jesse, but he wasn't even listening. He was staring at those stupid roses like they held the answers to the universe. Great. Just another reason to strangle Paul when I got back to school. E got an idea, I said, eager to wrap things up with Cece and Adam so I could get back to my almost boyfriend. How about Simon says vote for Suze? Cece, crouched by the poster board, tilted her head as sunlight from my west-facing windows turned her platinum hair golden. She repeated the slogan slowly, then grinned. Yeah, that works. Nice one, Simon. She immediately started scribbling it across the scattered poster boards on my floor. Clearly, neither she nor Adam was leaving any time soon. I shot a glance toward where Jesse had been standing, hoping to silently apologize for the interruption. But he was gone. Typical. Just when it seemed like he was finally about to say something big, poof. Ghosts don't exactly leave forwarding addresses. And let's be real, would you stick around in a room reeking of Sharpie with people who couldn't even see you? Still, I couldn't shake the worry. Had he followed Neil Janko? Or worse, was he gone for good? My stomach twisted as I stared at Paul's roses. The real question wasn't when Jesse would return, it was if. Cece and Adam bought my excuse about marker fumes making my eyes water. Too bad I wasn't fooling myself. 2 days later, my feet finally fit into my Steve Madden slides, and I dragged myself back to school, only to get summoned to the principal's office over the Father Dom's voice crackled through the speakers, cheerful as ever, reminding everyone about the upcoming Father Sarah feast before casually dropping. Suze Simon, please report to the principal's office after assembly. I figured he just wanted to check in. After all, I'd missed 2 days. You'd think someone would ask if I was still alive. Turns out, Father D had other plans. Father Dominic seemed genuinely worried about me, though his concern felt more spiritual than physical. Susanna, he said as I shuffled into his office. Walked would be too generous a word for how I was moving. My feet were still a mess, but at least my cushioned slides and the thick black straps hid most of the bandages. Even so, every step felt like walking on jagged pebbles. Some of those blisters had turned into hardened little rocks under my soles. When, he asked, his voice gentle but probing, were you planning to tell me about you and Jesse? I froze, clutching the silly putty I dug out of his bottom drawer, his usual stash of confiscated kid stuff. What about me and Jesse? I asked, completely baffled. There was no way he could know the truth, unless had someone actually told him. Father Dom fumbled for the right words, his discomfort obvious. That you two are, well, what do young people call it these days? An item, he finally managed. My face burned hotter than a California summer. We're not, I sputtered. Seriously, nothing could be further from reality. Who even told you that? Then it hit me, Paul, that snake. Did Paul say that? I snapped. Because, Father, I'm shocked you'd believe a word from him. The guy practically gave me these blisters. He came on way too strong, and when I tried to leave, he sent some biker after me. Father Dom cut me off, something he never does. Jesse told me himself, he said calmly. Now, what's this about Paul? My brain short-circuited. Jesse told you, my voice cracked. The room spun. Jesse had confessed feelings to Father Dom before saying a word to me. This wasn't just surprising, it was downright impossible. Good things like this didn't happen to me, ever, Swallowing hard, I forced myself to stay calm. Exactly what did Jesse say, Father? That you kissed, he muttered, shifting in his chair like he was sitting on thumbtacks. Susanna, I have to admit I'm deeply troubled that you kept this from me during our last conversation, Father Dominic said, his voice heavy with disappointment. I've never felt this let down by you before. It makes me question what else you might be hiding. I clenched my fists, the silly putty squishing between my fingers. I didn't tell you because it was just one stupid kiss weeks ago, and since then. Absolutely nothing. I swear, Father D, my voice cracked, frustration bubbling over. Not even a hint of anything, just nothing, he sighed, looking more dejected than I'd ever seen him. I thought we were close enough that you'd confide in me about something this serious. Serious? I nearly laughed, slamming the putty onto the desk. Father D, what part of nothing don't you get? It wasn't some scandal. It barely even happened. And that's the worst part. I understand, he said, his tone solemn. Jesse is too honorable to take advantage. But Susanna, I can't allow this to go on. Allow what? My voice pitched higher, disbelief twisting my words. Are we even having this conversation right now? It's like I stepped into some alternate universe. Ignoring me, he pressed on. I have a duty to your parents to protect your well-being spiritually and otherwise, and I owe Jesse guidance as his confessor. His what? I shot up from my chair, nearly tripping over my own feet. The room spun. There's no need to shout, he said, wincing. You heard me perfectly. He looked as miserable as I felt. Given the circumstances, I've advised Jesse to move into the rectory. My knees buckled. I barely caught myself on the edge of his desk, my nails digging into the wood. The rectory. My voice was shrill, foreign to my own ears. You're kicking him out. Father Dominic shifted uncomfortably. He'll be fine there, Susanna. It's a simple life, much like what he knew before, my brain short-circuited. And Jesse agreed. The words came out in a squeak. That can't be my voice. Father Dominic's gaze softened with pity. He did, he said quietly. And I'm truly sorry you had to find out like this. Jesse probably thought, and honestly, I can't blame him, that the whole situation would be, well, someone like me might have complicated things, maybe too much. Then, without warning, the tears hit me. No build-up, just a sudden sting in my nose, and suddenly I was choking back sobs, because I got it. Father Dom was dancing around the truth, but it was obvious. Jesse didn't love me. Never had. That kiss. Just curiosity. Worse than that, a regret. A messy, painful regret. And now he knew I'd lied about Paul, probably figured out why, that I was in love with him, always had been, and couldn't stand the thought of losing him. So instead of telling me he didn't feel the same, he was leaving. Just packing up and walking away because staying with me was worse than being alone. That's how little I meant to him. I collapsed into the chair across from Father Dom's desk, not even caring if he judged me for crying over a guy. Love doesn't just switch off because the other person doesn't want it. What did I do? I mumbled into my hands. Why is this happening? Father Dom sighed, sounding more flustered than comforting. Nothing, Susanna. You didn't do anything wrong. This is just how it has to be. Let's be real, Father Dom was great with ghosts, but teenage heartbreak. Not his strong suit. Still, he tried. He actually stood up, walked around his desk, and gave my shoulder an awkward pat for a guy who usually avoided physical contact. It was almost sweet. It'll be okay, he said, like he was soothing a skittish horse. Except it wouldn't, not ever. You can't keep living like this, he pressed. Jesse has to go, there's no other choice. I let out a bitter laugh. No other choice. So his only option is to move out. I swiped at my tears with my jacket sleeve, ruining the suede. That's how wrecked I was. Yeah, that makes sense. Susanna, he said gently, it was never his home, it's yours. He was just passing through, like a ghost. The word murdered hung in the air, and somehow that just made me cry harder. Father Dom kept patting my shoulder like he was trying to restart my heart. You need to face this like an adult, he said. I muttered something even I didn't understand. I have faith in you, he added, though it sounded more like a plea. You've handled worse. Maybe not elegantly, but you've survived. Now go, you're missing class. I didn't move. I slumped in the chair, wiping at my cheeks with the back of my hand. At least my mascara wasn't smearing small victories. But Father Dominic didn't offer the sympathy I expected from a priest. Instead, he gave me this wary look, like I was about to pull some stunt. Susanna, he started, hesitating before sighing. I need to be clear again. No using your charms on Jesse. I meant what I said before. If you're going to cry, do it here, not with him. Don't make this harder than it already is, understand? I kicked the leg of the chair, instantly wincing at the sharp pain. Seriously, I snapped. You think I'd beg him to stay? If he wants to leave, great, fantastic, even. My voice cracked, betraying me. But it's still not fair. Father Dominic softened slightly. Life rarely is, Susanna, but you have more blessings than most. You're a fortunate girl. Fortunate, I repeated with a scoff. Sure. He studied me, then gestured toward the door. You seem steadier now. I've got preparations for tomorrow's feast, so if you don't mind. I clenched my fists, thinking of everything I hadn't told him, Craig, Neil, Paul, the shifters. Maybe I should have mentioned Paul's so-called fresh start. But right now, I was too annoyed. No sympathy, no real concern, just a dismissal. Jesse couldn't even dump me himself. He sent a priest to do it. Classic. Hobbling out, running was off the table. I nearly collided with Father D's secretary. Oh, sweetheart, she murmured, pressing tissues into my hand. You okay? Her kindness stung more than Father Dominic's indifference. I grabbed a few extra tissues, knowing this wasn't over. Stepping outside, the courtyard breeze hit my face. Time to pull it together. Or at least pretend TOSO the guy wasn't into me. Big deal. Plenty of guys had blown me off before, and I'd always handled it just fine. But this was Jesse, the one person who meant everything to me. If he didn't want me back, whatever. His problem, not mine. So why were tears streaming down my face like some cheesy rom-com montage? How was I supposed to function without him? I'd gotten so used to him being around, filling up the quiet spaces in my life. And what about Spike? Was that grumpy furball moving into the rectory too? Of course he was. That cat adored Jesse as much as I did. Lucky little traitor. I paced the breezeway, staring blankly at the sunlit courtyard. Maybe Father D had a point. Maybe this was for the best. Let's say, hypothetically, Jesse actually felt the same way. Loved me, even. Then what? Like Paul said, what were we supposed to do? Go on dates? Catch a movie? I'd be the idiot buying one ticket, sitting alone, looking like some pathetic loner. Pathetic. What I really needed was a real boyfriend, someone solid, someone who actually existed outside my imagination. Someone who'd make Jesse regret walking away. And then, like some cosmic joke, Paul Slater popped out from behind a pillar. Hey, get lost, I muttered, swiping at my eyes with my sleeve. Of all people, Paul was the last one I wanted witnessing my meltdown. But of course he noticed. What's with the waterworks? He asked. Allergies, I lied, even though my voice wobbled. He grabbed my wrist and shoved a crisp white handkerchief into my hand. You carry a handkerchief, I croaked. He shrugged. Never know when you'll need to silence someone. The unexpected answer startled a laugh out of me. Yeah, Paul was unsettling, okay, downright creepy, but he had his moments. I dabbed at my face, hyper-aware of how close he was standing. The guy looked annoyingly good, dressed in a charcoal sweater and a leather jacket that probably cost more than my car. My gaze flicked to his mouth, remembering the way it had felt against mine. Warm, confident, way too distracting. Then I glanced at his eye, the one I'd punched. No bruise. Of course not. The guy was practically indestructible. I wished I could say the same about myself, or at least about my heart. Maybe Paul noticed where my eyes kept drifting. It was pretty obvious I'd been staring at his lips. Suddenly, he lifted his arms and braced his hands against the wide column I was leaning on, one of those holding up the breezeway roof, effectively trapping me between them. "So, Suze," he said casually, like we were just catching up, "what did Father Dom want with you?" Sure, I was open to dating, but Paul, I wasn't sold. Yeah, he was undeniably attractive, and we shared that whole Mediator connection. But there was also the minor detail that he'd tried to kill me. Hard to just brush that off. Standing there, boxed in by his arms, I was torn. Part of me wanted to grab him and kiss him senseless. The other part wanted to knee him where it counted, considering what he'd put me through, the scorching pavement, the near-death encounter. I did neither. My pulse hammered in my chest. This was the guy who'd been haunting my nightmares for weeks. One heated moment didn't erase that. "Relax," I said, my voice rough from crying. I swallowed hard. "I didn't tell Father Dom anything about you, if that's what you're worried about." Paul's tension eased instantly. He even reached out, twisting a loose curl of my hair around his finger. "You should wear it down more," he murmured. "It suits you." I rolled my eyes to cover the way my heart stuttered at his touch, then tried to slip under his arm. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, stepping closer until we were barely inches apart. His breath smelled like mint, too alive, too real. "Jesse's never had that problem." "Paul," I said, forcing my voice steady. "Seriously, not here." "Fine," he said, not budging. "Where then?" I pressed a hand to my forehead, suddenly too warm despite the cool shade of the breezeway. Was it him? Was he the reason my skin burned? "I don't know, okay? I need space to figure things out. Just give me some breathing room." "Sure," he said, finally backing off. "Did the flowers make it to you?" "Yeah, they did," I muttered. The heat rushing through me, whether from anger or something else, pushed me to keep talking when all I wanted was to bolt for the nearest bathroom and stay there until the bell rang. "But if you think some cheap bouquet makes up for what you pulled—" "I already apologized, Suze," Paul cut in. His voice dropped, almost too sincere. "And I feel awful about your feet. You should have let me take you home. I wouldn't have pulled anything, I swear." "Oh, really?" I tilted my head up. He still had a good 6 inches on me, but his mouth was way too close for comfort. Not that I was thinking about closing the distance. Probably. "Then what do you call this little performance?" "Suze," he murmured, twisting a strand of my hair around his finger. His breath was warm against my skin. "How else am I supposed to get through to you? You've got me all wrong. I'm not the villain here, honestly. I'm a lot like you." "Somehow, I highly doubt that," I shot back, struggling to keep my voice steady. It wasn't fear making my pulse race, not the usual kind, anyway. "It's true," he insisted. "We're more alike than you think, not just the Mediator stuff. We see the world the same way, cynical, skeptical, expecting the worst from everyone. Face it, we're both old souls. Nothing shocks us. Nothing even interests us." His icy stare locked onto mine. "At least, not until now." "Wow, Paul," I said, forcing a dry laugh even though my lungs felt tight. "Here's the thing, the person I trust least in this world. That be you," he smirked. "Funny, since we're clearly perfect for each other, just because you met Jesse first." "Stop." The word tore out of me before I could stop it. Just hearing that name from his lips made my stomach twist. "Don't you dare," Paul pressed a finger to my mouth. "Careful," he murmured, tracing my jawline. "You don't mean that, you're just scared. Scared to admit I might actually know a thing or two you don't. Scared to face the fact that maybe, just maybe, you're not as devoted to Saint Jesse as you pretend." He leaned in. "Admit it. You definitely felt something when I kissed you before. Don't even try to lie about it." Felt something before. Right now, just the brush of his fingertip tracing my collarbone sent shivers through me. It wasn't fair. How could someone I despised, and I did despise him, have this effect on me? Meanwhile, the one person I actually loved left me feeling completely. Paul shifted closer, the heat of his body pressing against my sweater. "Want to test that theory again?" His breath was warm, his lips barely an inch from mine. "For science," I should have let him. Every part of me screamed too. After the humiliation in Father Dom's office, I craved any kind of validation, even from the last person I ever expected. Maybe some buried fear still lingered, making my pulse race. But I couldn't. Not here, not like this. I jerked back, my voice tight. Not now, Paul, I'm not in the mood. On impulse, I shoved him hard. He stumbled, catching himself with a surprised laugh. Damn, what's your problem? Nothing, I muttered, twisting the fabric of his handkerchief between my fingers. Just bad news. His smirk widened. Oh yeah, let me guess, Mr. Perfect finally ghosted you. The sound that escaped me was half gasp, half choked sob. Even Paul froze at the raw reaction. Wait, seriously? He asked, his tone shifting. He actually did. I clenched my jaw, refusing to answer. Why wouldn't he just leave? Figured something was up when he never came after me, he mused. Unless you never told him about us. I turned to walk away, but his next words froze me in place. Or is it that you couldn't tell him? Because maybe, just maybe, you felt something you're too scared to admit. I whirled around, fury burning in my chest. Or maybe, I said, keeping my voice low, some part of me didn't want blood on my conscience. Ever consider that, Paul, because Jesse already can't stand you. If I told him what you pulled or tried to pull, he'd end you. The lie slipped out effortlessly. Paul didn't know better, but his reaction wasn't what I expected. See, he flashed that infuriating grin. You must care a little. Otherwise, you'd have let him finish the job. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. What was the point? As I turned to leave, the hallway erupted with movement. Doors swung open, students poured into the breezeway. Mission Academy didn't believe in bells, too disruptive to the tranquil courtyard vibes, so we just moved when the clock struck. First period was officially over. Paul didn't budge, even as bodies swarmed around him. Well, Suze, he called over the noise. Admit it, you don't want me gone, you like having me around. I rolled my eyes. Arguing with him was like talking to a brick wall, one that somehow always twisted things in his favor. And the worst part, he wasn't entirely wrong. Paul, Kelly Prescott materialized beside him, tossing her golden hair. I've been searching everywhere. About the election, we should hand out candy at lunch. You know, a little incentive for votes. Paul barely glanced at her. His stare stayed locked on me. Well, he pressed, ignoring the chaos of slamming lockers and hushed chatter. Going to say it. You, I shot back, need professional help. As I pushed past them, Kelly tugged at Paul's jacket, shooting me uneasy looks. Paul, hello, the election, it's today. Then Paul did the unthinkable, something that would become Academy legend. Not just because Cece witnessed it, and you know that was going straight to the school paper, but because in all her years at Mission, no one had ever dared do this to Kelly Prescott. He shut her down. Hard. Seriously, he snapped, yanking his coat free. Can you give me 5 damn seconds? Kelly froze, looking like she'd been slapped. WH what? You heard me, Paul said. Not even looking at her, the entire breezeway froze, every eye locked on Paul as if he were about to perform some wild stunt. I'm done with you, this ridiculous election, and this entire school, he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Got it. Now disappear before I really lose my temper. Kelly's mouth fell open like she'd just been slapped. Paul, she choked out. But the election, the fundraiser, he didn't let her finish. Take your fundraiser, he said, his tone icy, and shove it. Mr. Slater, a hall monitor, one of the freshmen assigned to keep the noise down between classes, lunged toward him. Principal's office. Now. Paul fired back with a remark so blistering I actually winced, and I've heard my stepbrothers drop worse when they thought no adults were listening. The poor hall monitor burst into tears and bolted toward Father Dominic's office. Paul watched her go, then turned his glare on Kelly, who was now sniffling into her sleeve. Finally, his eyes landed on me. There was fury there, sure, but something else too, something raw. Hurt. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd never considered that Paul could actually feel things. Maybe I'd been right when I told Jesse he was just lonely. Not that he was doing himself any favors with this little meltdown. Before I could process it, he was gone, storming out of the building. Seconds later, the roar of his convertible's engine and the screech of tires echoed through the parking lot. Cece sidled up beside me, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "Well," she said, nudging me with her elbow. "Guess that settles the election, huh?" She grabbed my wrist and yanked it into the air like a boxing referee. "Long live the new VP." Paul didn't show up for the rest of the day. Not that anyone was surprised. By lunch, word had spread through the junior class like wildfire. If he dared step foot back on campus, he'd be slapped with a week's suspension. Debbie Mancuso swore she heard it straight from a sixth grader who'd been in the office when Father Dom was ranting about unacceptable behavior. The poor hall monitor had apparently had a full-blown meltdown, needing a cold compress and a lie-down in the nurse's office. I spotted Father Dom pacing outside, his expression stormy. Part of me wanted to stroll up and say, "I warned you," but it felt too much like kicking a guy when he was down. Besides, I was still ticked at him over the whole Jessie mess. The longer I stewed over it, the more furious I became. It felt like Jessie and Kelly had teamed up behind my back, treating me like some naive teenager with a silly crush they needed to manage. Jessie couldn't even muster the courage to reject me to my face. What did he think I'd do? Punch him? Right now, part of me wanted to, while the other half just wished I could disappear. Turns out I wasn't the only one drowning in misery. Kelly Prescott was putting on her own dramatic performance, peeling the Slater labels off her candy bars and scribbling Simon on the foil with a Sharpie. Guess we were back to being rivals in heartbreak. The junior class election results came in, and I won vice president by a landslide, except for one rogue vote for Brad Ackerman, who didn't even bother hiding his handwriting. Nobody cared, though, not with the massive party he was throwing later. The plan was for Jake to swing by after his shift at Peninsula Pizza with a keg and stacks of pizza, but Brad had already started cracking up at the note my mom and Andy left, forbidding guests while they were out of town. Honestly, I had bigger problems than a hot tub rager. Cece and Adam insisted on celebrating my victory, even though it felt meaningless with Kelly basically expelled. Adam showed up with sparkling cider, and I couldn't refuse, not after how hard they'd worked on my campaign, while I'd barely lifted a finger. So I went along to the beach, where we toasted the sunset like we had when I won my first election back in Carmel. When I got home, chaos had already arrived. Debbie Mancuso, who'd been crushing on Brad since I caught them in Kelly's pool house, was stacking cups in the kitchen. Then she hit me with it. "So, Suze, who's this mystery guy Brad says you're dating?" My stomach dropped. She thought she knew about Jessie. And suddenly, the party was the last place I wanted to be. Brad was out by the hot tub with his buddies, dumping way too much chlorine into the water, probably bracing for the bacterial nightmare his sketchy friends would bring later. Debbie had gone full party mode, wearing a crop top and these ridiculous harem pants that somehow made her backside look even bigger than it already was. Normally, I wouldn't trash another girl, but Debbie Mancuso was the kind of leech who'd been draining Kelly for years. I just prayed I wouldn't be her next victim. "Just some guy," I said, brushing past her to grab a soda from the fridge. I needed the caffeine boost, first to deal with Jessie, then to survive this disaster of a party. "Does he go to RLS?" Debbie pressed. "Nope," I said, popping the tab. Brad had already tossed Andy and Mom's note, which was probably for the best. "He's not in high school." Debbie's eyes lit up. "Wait, so he's in college. Does Jake know him?" "No," I said flatly. When I didn't offer more, she switched gears. "That thing with Paul today was so weird, right?" "Yeah," I muttered, half wondering if Jessie was even still here or if he'd bylaid without a word. Lately, I wouldn't put it past him. Debbie fumbled for words. "Some girls were saying, like, Paul seems kinda into you." I gave her a cold smile. Well, at least someone is. Heading upstairs, I ran into David lugging a sleeping bag, his laptop, and Max on a leash. Crashing at Todd's, he said. No way I'm sleeping through this circus. Smart move, I said. You should ditch too, he suggested. Go to Cece's. Wish I could, I said, raising my soda. But I've got unfinished business here. David shrugged. Your funeral. Jesse's absence in my room didn't surprise me. Typical. I kicked off my shoes, locked the bathroom door, not that it'd stop a ghost, but whatever, and sank into a steaming bath. The water helped my sore feet, but nothing could fix the mess in my chest. Some nights, even bubbles and bath salts couldn't wash away the drama a candy bar might have taken the edge off, but my bathroom wasn't exactly stocked with snacks. The truth was, Father Dom had a point. Jesse leaving was probably for the best. What was I supposed to do, mope around forever? Unrequited love works in romance novels, but in reality it's just miserable. The worst part? I could have sworn that kiss weeks ago meant something to him. Not like whatever I felt for Paul, that was pure attraction, no denying it. But Jesse, I'd been so certain he loved me. Turns out I was wrong. Again. After a long soak, I dried off, wrapped my sore feet in fresh bandages, and pulled on my favorite ripped jeans. The ones Mom swore she'd toss if she caught me wearing them outside, paired with an old black tee. When I walked into my room, there he was perched on the windowsill with Spike curled in his lap. One look told me he knew exactly what Father Dom had said, and he was bracing for my reaction. Still here, I said, forcing a casual tone. Thought you'd be halfway to the rectory by now. His voice dropped low, almost a growl. Susanna, I shrugged, feigning indifference. Don't let me keep you. Heard there's a ton of prep for tomorrow's feast, piñatas to stuff, decorations to hang, sounds thrilling. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. So much for maturity. Jesse stood, his expression unreadable. You know this is for the best. Oh, absolutely, I said, rolling my eyes. Say hi to Sister Ernestine for me. He just stared, his dark eyes impossible to decipher. That's it. That's all you have to say. I almost laughed. He was the one leaving, and now he was mad. Actually, wait, I said, snapping my fingers like I'd just remembered. How is Craig doing? Something flickered in his gaze, disappointment, before it vanished. He didn't answer as if he had any right to be disappointed. My heart was the one being torn to shreds. He hasn't changed, Jesse muttered. Still bitter about being a ghost. If you want, I could ask Father Dominic. Oh, please, I cut him off. You and Father Dominic have already done more than enough. I can deal with Craig myself. Fine, Jesse snapped. Fine, I shot back. We stood there, the tension thick between us. His dark eyes locked onto mine. Goodbye, Susanna. Sure, I said, trying to sound casual. Catch you later. But Jesse didn't leave. Instead, he did something that caught me completely off guard. He reached out and brushed his fingers against my cheek. Susanna, he murmured. The dim light from my bedroom lamp reflected in his eyes like tiny stars. Susanna, the door swung open before he could finish. Hope I'm not interrupting anything, Paul Slater drawled from the doorway. Paul, I'd completely forgotten about him and everything we'd been tangled up in lately. Things I really didn't want Jesse knowing about. Ever heard of knocking? I snapped, hoping Paul wouldn't notice the way Jesse and I jerked apart. Paul smirked, looking way too pleased with himself for someone who'd been suspended earlier. Heard all the commotion and figured you had company. Didn't realize it was Mr. De Silva, though. Jesse's glare could have melted steel. Slater, he said coldly. Jesse, Paul replied, all fake cheer. How's the afterlife treating you? Better before you showed up, Jesse shot back. Paul raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. Really? Suze didn't fill you in. Fill me in on WH, Jesse started, but I cut him off. The shifting, I stepped between them as if that could stop whatever disaster Paul was about to unleash. And the soul transfer stuff, no, I haven't had time yet, but I will, thanks for dropping by. Paul just grinned, and that grin sent my pulse racing, not in a good way. "That's not why I'm here," he said, flashing his perfect teeth. I felt Jesse stiffen beside me. Even Spike, perched on the windowsill with his fur puffed up, was growling at Paul like he was public enemy number one. Jesse wasn't as obvious, but the hostility was there, simmering. "If you're looking for Brad's party," I said quickly, "you took a wrong turn, it's downstairs." "Not here for the party either," Paul said, digging into his jeans pocket. "Just came to return this." He pulled out something small and dark, holding it between his fingers like a threat. "You left this in my room the other night." I stared at the object resting in his open hand, a missing tortoiseshell clip. But I hadn't lost it in his room. It had vanished Monday morning, the first day back at school. He must have found it then, tucked it away all week just for this moment, just to throw it in Jesse's face like a grenade. Because that's what Paul did. He didn't fix things, didn't smooth them over. He wrecked them. One glance at Jesse told me the damage was done. He looked like he'd been sucker punched, breath knocked clean out of him. I knew the feeling. Paul had a gift for that. "Thanks," I snapped, yanking the clip from his palm. "But I lost it at school, not your place." "Really?" Paul's smile was all innocence, the kind that made you doubt your own memory. "Could have sworn I found it tangled in my sheets." Then impact. No warning, no wind-up. 1 second I was scrambling for an explanation, the next Jesse's fist connected with Paul's jaw. Paul staggered backward, crashing into my vanity. Bottles shattered, perfume soaking into the carpet as he sprawled across the ruffled skirt of the desk. "Stop!" I wedged myself between them, hands pressed against Jesse's chest. "He's baiting you. I went to his house once because he claimed to know something about soul transference. That's it. Nothing happened." "Nothing at all," Paul chimed in, wiping blood from his nose with the back of his hand. He grinned at Jesse, crimson streaking his teeth. "Hey, Suarez, she make that little gasp when you kiss her too." Rage burned through me. How could he? Worse, how could I have been reckless enough to let him? That kiss had been a mistake, born of hurt and loneliness, but I never meant for it to detonate like this. Jesse's next punch sent Paul sprawling onto the window seat, scattering throw pillows. Spike, my ever-dramatic cat, yowled and bolted through the open window. Paul lifted his head, smearing blood across the velvet. "Enough!" I grabbed Jesse's arm before he could swing again. "He's not worth it, can't you see?" "He wants this. Don't let him win," I muttered under my breath. Paul groaned from where he lay sprawled on the floor, his head tilted back against the blood-stained cushion. He pressed his fingers against his nose, trying to slow the steady trickle of red. "That's not what this is about," he said, his voice thick. "Jesse, listen, Suze deserves better than this. How long do you think this can last? I didn't say anything before, but I'm saying it now because I know what's going through your head. Soul transference isn't some harmless spell. It's erasing one life to make room for another. That's not just magic, it's murder, and Suze. She's not a killer, you're keeping her trapped, Jesse. One way or another, you'll have to let go." Jesse's arm tensed under my grip, and I threw my whole weight against him. "Shut up, Paul," I snapped. But Paul just laughed, blood still dripping down his chin. "And what about you, Jesse? What can you actually offer her? You can't even buy her a damn coffee." That was it. Jesse tore free from my hold like a snapped rubber band. 1 second he was beside me, the next he was on top of Paul, their hands locked around each other's throats. They hit the floor with a crash that rattled the walls. Not that anyone would hear. Brad had cranked up the stereo downstairs, bass thumping through the floorboards. Some hip-hop anthem, probably. The neighbors were definitely in for a sleepless night. Jesse and Paul rolled across the floor, locked in a brutal tangle. I considered grabbing something heavy, a lamp maybe, but honestly they both had skulls like concrete. Talking hadn't worked. Ignoring them hadn't worked. If I didn't do something fast, they'd tear each other apart and it would be on me. Then it hit me, the fire extinguisher. I didn't even think. 1 second I was watching Jesse slam Paul into my bookshelf. The next I was bolting out the door, the music swelling louder as I raced downstairs. Brad's party was in full chaos. The living room was a sea of bodies, half-dressed and swaying to the beat. I barely recognized half of them. Jake must have brought his college buddies. I dodged past Neil Janko, who was clutching a red Solo cup, beer sloshing everywhere as I shoved through the crowd. So Jake had shown up with the keg. Great. I pressed myself against the wall, squeezing past the mob packed into the hallway. The kitchen had to be close. I just had to get there before those idiots upstairs killed each other. When I finally made it downstairs, the place was swarming with strangers. Peering through the glass doors, I spotted the hot tub, designed for 8, now crammed with at least 30 people piled on top of each other like some wild pool party gone wrong. My house had turned into a scene straight out of a raucous reality show. Desperate for space, I grabbed the fire extinguisher from under the sink. Andy always kept it there for kitchen emergencies, and had to practically scream myself hoarse just to squeeze back into the hallway. Then, over the noise, someone shrieked my name. I spun around, stunned to see Cece and Adam standing there. "What are you doing here?" I shouted. "We got an invite," Cece shot back, sounding a little defensive. No surprise, they definitely weren't part of Brad's usual crowd. Adam waved one of Brad's flyers like a backstage pass. "See, totally legit." "Great," I muttered. "Enjoy the chaos. I've got a disaster unfolding upstairs." "We'll come with you," Cece insisted. "This place is insane." Yeah, because my room was so much better, what with Paul Slater brawling with the ghost of my almost boyfriend. "Stay here," I ordered. "I'll be right back." But Adam spotted the fire extinguisher and grinned. "Sweet, special effects." Before I could stop him, he was following me. Fine. If they wanted to witness a ghostly showdown, that was on them. Just as we reached the stairs, Paul and Jesse came tumbling down in a tangled mess of fists and fabric. At least, that's what I saw. To everyone else, it looked like Paul was getting thrown around by thin air. He crashed at Cece's feet and she shrieked, "Suze, what the hell is happening?" Jesse recovered first, yanking Paul up just to deck him again. The crowd froze, music still blaring as they gaped at Paul being hurled across the room by some invisible force. The party vibe died instantly. Now it was just a room full of stunned faces watching a guy get beat up by a ghost. Cece gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Is he high or something?" she asked, her voice trembling. Adam shrugged. "Wouldn't surprise me," he muttered. Just then, Jake burst into the room, his eyes widening at the sight of Paul thrashing on the floor, Jesse's invisible grip tight around his throat. "Holy crap," Jake breathed before spotting me with the fire extinguisher. He snatched it from my hands and blasted Paul with a thick spray of foam. It didn't help. The two of them just rolled wildly into the dining room, sending guests scrambling as they slammed into Mom's china cabinet. The crash was deafening, plates shattering everywhere. Jake stared in disbelief. "What is his problem? Is he on something?" Neil, still clutching his beer, frowned. "Could be a seizure. Someone call 911. Jake's face paled. No ambulances, no cops." His protests were cut short when Jesse hurled Paul straight through the sliding glass door. The explosion of glass finally caught the attention of the people in the hot tub, who screamed as they tried to dodge the flying shards. Barefoot and trapped, they watched in horror as Paul and Jesse brawled across the deck. Brad, tangled up with Debbie Mancuso, gaped at the wreckage. "Slater," he roared, "you're buying a new door, you lunatic." But Paul wasn't listening. Jesse had him by the throat, dangling him over the bubbling water. "Stay away from her," Jesse growled, the jacuzzi lights casting an eerie glow on their faces. Paul choked out a laugh. "Not happening." Jesse shoved him under, holding him down as Neil shouted, "He's drowning himself. Somebody stop him." "Jesse, stop," I yelled. "This isn't worth it." Cece spun around. "Wait, Jesse S. here." The distraction gave Jake and Neil just enough time to haul Paul out, coughing and bleeding. I stepped between them, my voice shaking. "Enough! You've destroyed my house. You've destroyed each other." I glanced around at the curious, half-scared stares fixed on me and added, "And I think you've completely ruined whatever good reputation I had left." Before Jesse or Paul could respond, Craig Jankow suddenly appeared beside his brother, shaking his head. "Unbelievable," he said, flashing a grin. "You throw a party like this and don't even invite me. Mediators really know how to have a good time." Jesse ignored him, his focus locked on Paul. "Stay away from her," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. Paul just smirked and slid back into the bubbling hot tub with a splash. Jesse yanked him out again, only this time Neil went under too. Craig, ever the opportunist, had decided to follow through on his twisted logic. If he was gone, his brother should be too. "Neil!" Jake shouted, struggling to pull both of them up, unaware that ghostly hands were dragging them deeper. I knew exactly what was happening. Ghosts don't play fair, they're stronger than any of us. No amount of threats or force would make them let go, which meant I had to do the one thing I'd sworn I'd never do again. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. The last time I'd gone to that place, I'd barely made it out alive. What if Paul had lied? What if this time there was no way back? But what choice did I have? None. Gritting my teeth, I plunged my hands into the churning water, grabbing fistfuls of fabric, no idea whose, and squeezed my eyes shut. I pictured that dark, suffocating place I'd hoped to never see again. When I opened my eyes, I was there. And I wasn't alone. Paul stood beside me, bewildered. Craig blinked, scanning the endless, silent hallway. "What the?" he muttered, his voice echoing in the eerie stillness. "What kind of messed up place is this?" I demanded, my voice echoing down the endless corridor. Paul smirked, pretending to dust off his sleeve even though we were just spirits here. No actual dirt, no real clothes. "Somewhere you've been avoiding," he said, then turned to me with a grin. "Not bad for your first time, Suze. Cut it out." My stomach twisted. This was the last place I wanted to be, a nightmare that left me hollowed out every time I woke up from it, a place that stole my breath and my nerve. I'm not exactly thrilled about this little trip. "Yeah, I noticed." Paul rubbed his nose absently. No blood here, no soaked clothes, just the eerie stillness of the spirit world. "You realize we're basically comatose back in the real world, right?" "Obviously," I snapped, my eyes darting down the fog-choked hallway. Just like in my dreams, the ends vanished into nothing, just an endless stretch of doors. "Well," Paul said, "at least Jesse's gonna notice when you suddenly drop unconscious." "Shut up," I muttered, my throat tight. I hated crying almost as much as I hated falling into dark, endless voids. "This is your fault, you shouldn't have pushed him." "And you," Paul shot back, his voice sharp, "shouldn't have been." Guys," Craig cut in. "Mind filling me in on what's—" "Shut up," Paul and I snapped in unison. Then, my voice wavering, I turned back to Paul. "Look, I'm sorry about what happened at your place. I wasn't thinking, but that doesn't mean anything's going on." "You weren't thinking," Paul repeated flatly. "Exactly," I said, shivering as the cold mist curled around my ankles. This place was all wrong, the silence, the fog, the way the ground could disappear any second. "What if I want something to be going on?" he asked. "Tough luck," I shot back. Paul glanced at Craig, who was now poking at the doors like a curious kid. "What about shifting?" Paul pressed. "What about it?" "I showed you the basics, but there's more, way more, things you can't even imagine." I hesitated. Part of me burned with curiosity, remembering what he'd hinted at before, soul transference, power beyond anything I'd dreamed. But the other part wanted to stay far, far away from Paul Slater. "Come on, Suze," he said, his voice low. "You know you want to learn." For as long as I could remember, I'd been searching for answers about who or what I truly was. And here was Paul Slater claiming he had all the knowledge I craved. "I know everything," he said, his voice dripping with confidence. "And I'll share it with you if you're willing to learn." I studied him carefully, suspicion creeping in. "What's in it for you?" I demanded. "The joy of your presence," he replied with a grin. His tone was light, but I wasn't fooled. Nothing about this was casual. As much as I ached to uncover the secrets he promised, I hesitated. Because the price. Spending time with Paul. Still, it might be worth it. Not for the so-called gift he kept hinting at, but because this could finally keep Jessie safe from him. "Fine," I said abruptly. Paul's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but before he could react, I added sharply, "But Jessie is off limits. No more taunts, no more fights, and absolutely no more exorcism attempts. Got it." A slow smirk spread across his face. "So that's the deal," he mused. "That's the deal," I confirmed. The silence stretched so long I thought he might back out, which honestly wouldn't have been the worst thing, except for Jessie's sake. Then, with a careless shrug, Paul said, "Works for me." I couldn't believe it. Had I actually just secured Jessie's safety? Paul's indifference made me think I had. The moment was interrupted when Craig, ever the nuisance, jiggled one of the mysterious doors nearby. "Hey, what's behind these?" he called. "Your destiny," Paul said with a smirk. Craig glanced back. "Seriously, my destiny?" "Sure," Paul said, "or eternal torment, depends on how you've lived." "Don't listen to him," I cut in. "No one knows what's behind those doors. People only go in, they don't come back out." Craig stared at the door, thoughtful. "Next life, huh? Or salvation," Paul added. "Or damnation, only one way to find out." Craig hesitated, then sighed. "Well, it's gotta be better than this." He turned the knob, a blinding flash erupted, and when the light faded, Craig was gone. Paul dusted off his hands. "Now that he's taken care of." I stared at the empty space where Craig had stood, stunned. Just like that, he was gone. The mist hung motionless, as if frozen in time. "Can we please leave now?" Paul shivered slightly. "This place gives me the creeps." I was surprised he felt the same way I did about the spirit world. Did he wake up in a cold sweat over it too? Probably not. But I had a feeling my own nightmares were finally over. "Fine," I said. "But how do we get back?" "Same as before," Paul said, shutting his eyes. "Just imagine it." I closed mine, feeling his grip on my arm and the damp chill of the fog against my skin. Then silence shattered. Blaring music, shouts, and the wail of sirens filled the air. My eyelids fluttered open to Jesse's face hovering above me, his features washed in the pulsing red and white lights of the ambulance parked nearby. Cece and Jake crowded in beside him. "She's awake," Cece shrieked. "Oh my God, Suze, are you okay?" I pushed myself up, my head throbbing like I'd been sucker punched. My fingers dug into my temples. The pain was brutal, nauseating, relentless. "Susanna." Jesse's arm tightened around me, his voice low and urgent. "What happened? Where did you go? Where's Craig?" "Right where he should be," I muttered, squinting against the flashing lights. "Is Neil okay?" "He's fine." Jesse looked as unsteady as I felt, no surprise, given I'd just collapsed out of nowhere. My jeans were soaked from the hot tub spill, and my hair, a disaster. I didn't even want to think about it. "Susanna," Jesse pressed, his grip almost protective. "Tell me what happened." "Who's Neil?" Cece cut in, shooting Adam a nervous glance. "Oh no, she's hallucinating." "Later," I said, catching sight of Paul a few feet away. Unlike Neil, still sprawled near the shattered glass door, he wasn't being checked by EMTs. But he was just as drenched, coughing up pool water, his nose bleeding like crazy. The EMT crouched beside me, taking my pulse. "She just blacked out," Cece announced. "And no, she wasn't drinking." "Seems to be a trend tonight," the EMT muttered, shining a penlight in my eyes. "You hit your head." "Not that I remember," I said, flinching at the glare. "She might have when she fell," Cece added. The EMT sighed. "When will you kids learn?" "Alcohol and hot tubs don't mix," she scolded, arms crossed. I didn't bother explaining I hadn't touched either. I was still in my clothes, for crying out loud. The EMT finally released me after checking my vitals, advising water and rest. Neil got the same, all clear. Later, I spotted him by the curb, phone pressed to his ear as he called a cab. Your car's safe now, I told him. He just stared at me like I'd lost it. Paul wasn't as lucky. His nose was broken, so they hauled him off to the emergency room. Right before they wheeled him away, he squinted at me through the splint taped to his face. Headache, he rasped. Like a jackhammer, I admitted. Forgot to warn you, he croaked. Happens every time after shifting. He tried to grin, but it came out as a wince. I'll be back, he muttered, channeling a half-hearted Terminator impression. Then the Emps whisked him away. I scanned the crowd for Jesse, unsure what I'd even say, maybe something about Paul being out of the picture. Didn't matter, he was gone. Instead, Brad came sprinting up, breathless. Suze, some moron called the cops. We gotta stash the keg before they show. I just stared. Not happening. His eyes widened. They'll take it or arrest us all. Over by Adam's car, Cece waved. Hey, C, I called. Can I crash at your place tonight? She smirked. Only if you spill everything about Jesse. Nothing to spill, I said, because there was. He'd vanished, and I had a sinking feeling I knew where. The next afternoon, we split a cannoli at the Father Sarah Festival. Men suck, Cece announced, powdered sugar dusting her lips. Tell me about it, I groaned. They're either all over you or ghosting you, no in between. Welcome to my life, I muttered. She frowned. It can't be that bad. I wasn't in the mood to debate. My post-shifting headache had just faded, and the whole Jesse situation. Yeah, not up for dissection. Plus, my parents had come home to a wrecked house and a police notice. Surprisingly, they hadn't murdered me. Yet Brad got grounded indefinitely, and Jake, who not only went along with the party plan but also supplied the drinks, lost every penny of his Camaro savings to cover the fines. The only reason David escaped Andy's wrath was because he'd been safely at Todd's the whole time. But trust me, Andy was this close to losing it, especially after my mom saw the wrecked china cabinet. Not that I was in their good graces either, not because they knew I'd smashed it, but because I hadn't snitched on my stepbrothers. I could have hinted at blackmail, but then they'd wonder what Brad had on me. So I stayed quiet, relieved that for once, I wasn't the main culprit. Well, except for the cabinet, but luckily no one else knew that. Still, I wasn't about to dodge responsibility. My babysitting money was definitely going toward repairs. They probably considered grounding me too, but they couldn't stop me from going to the Father Sarah Festival. As part of student council, Sister Ernestine expected me to run a booth. That's how Cece and I ended up at the cannoli stand, both of us exhausted from the night before, between the fight, the supernatural detour, and our marathon gossip session fueled by popcorn and chocolate. The crowd didn't seem to notice our zombie-like state, though. Maybe the sunglasses helped. Paul Slater, Cece said suddenly, between bites of a cannoli. Sister Ernestine had made a questionable call putting us in charge of desserts, considering we'd eaten half the inventory. After the night we'd had, sugar was basically a necessity. What about him? He's into you. Maybe, I shrugged. Maybe that's all you've got. I already told you, I said. I like someone else. Right, Cece said. Jesse. Right, Jesse. Who, by the way, doesn't like you back. Yeah. We sat there, the mariachi music blaring, kids whacking piñatas by the fountain. The statue of Junipero Serra was draped in flower garlands, and the air smelled like sausage and peppers mixing with tacos. Our church community was as Italian as it was Latino. Then Cece adjusted her sunglasses and dropped the bomb. Jesse's a ghost, isn't he? I nearly choked on my cannoli. What? I coughed. He's a ghost, she repeated. Don't even try to lie. I was there last night, Suze. I witnessed things that defied logic. You were speaking to someone who wasn't there, yet somehow Paul was being held underwater. You've lost it, I snapped, my face burning. No, Cece said firmly. I haven't. Trust me, I'd rather be wrong. You know how much I despise anything that doesn't have a scientific explanation. Those phony TV psychics who claim to talk to spirits. But with you. A tipsy tourist, buzzed from the sunshine and weak beer at the German stand, dropped $1 on the counter. Cece handed him a cannoli, only to realize we were out of napkins. He just laughed and wandered off, dessert in hand. "But what?" I pressed, my fingers tapping nervously. "With you, I'll believe it," she said, lifting the empty dispenser. "And one day you're going to tell me everything." I exhaled, my pulse finally steadying. "Cece, trust me. Ignorance is bliss." She shook her head. "Not for me. I hate unanswered questions." With that, she rattled the empty dispenser. "I'll grab more napkins. You good here for a sec?" I nodded, but the moment she left, my hands trembled. Only one other person, Gina, my best friend back in Brooklyn, knew even part of my secret. Father Dom and Paul were the others, but Gina didn't know the full story. Who'd believe something like this? Yet Cece had pieced it together herself. Maybe it wasn't as insane as I'd always thought. Lost in my thoughts, I barely registered the voice calling my name or a close approximation of it 3 times. When I finally looked up, a guy in a light blue uniform stood there, grinning. Beside him, Paul's grandfather sat in his wheelchair. "Susan, right?" the attendant said. I blinked. Hi," confused, didn't even begin to cover it. "What are you?" "I thought he couldn't leave the house," the nurse chuckled. "Not exactly. Mr. Slater likes his outings. Insisted on coming today, even after what happened to Paul. But he's recovering fine, and Mr. S. here wasn't taking no for an answer." "Right, sir." Then, to my shock, Paul's grandfather looked up sharply and said, clear as day, "Get me a beer." The nurse's smile faltered. "All right, Mr. S.," the nurse said. "You know your doctor's orders. Just get it done," Mr. Slater cut in. The nurse shot me a knowing look, as if to say, "What can you do?" Before heading off to the beer stand, leaving me alone with him, I studied him carefully. The last time I'd seen him, he'd been slumped in his wheelchair, barely coherent. Now, though his watery blue eyes still looked tired, there was a sharpness in them, like he was tracking every little detail around us, not just the carnival chaos or the distant hum of Wheel of Fortune playing on a nearby TV. Then he leaned in, his voice urgent. "Listen, we don't have much time. I was hoping you'd show up." His words came fast but clear, forcing me to lean closer over the tray of cannolis just to catch them. "You're one of them," he whispered. "A shifter, trust me, I know, I used to be one too." I blinked. "You what?" "Slasky," he corrected. "Not Slater, my idiot son changed it. Didn't want folks knowing he was related to some old crackpot who talked about people walking among the dead." I just gaped at him. What was I supposed to say to that? It hit me harder than anything Cece had dropped on me earlier. "I know what my grandson told you," he went on. "Don't listen. He's got it all backwards. Yeah, you've got the gift, but it'll destroy you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually." His wrinkled face, weathered with age, locked onto mine. I've been there, thought I was untouchable, thought I was more than human. But don't make my mistakes, Susan. Stay away from the shadows. They'll eat you alive. Before I could argue, his nurse returned, balancing a plastic cup of beer. "Here you go, Mr. Slater," she chirped, tilting it toward his lips. To my shock, Dr. Slasky let the beer spill down his chin, soaking his shirt. "Whoops," the nurse sighed. "Let's get you cleaned up." She flashed me a grin. "Good seeing you, Susan. Catch you later." Then she wheeled him away toward the ring toss booth, leaving me frozen in place. That was it, I couldn't stay here another second. Cece had vanished, but the cannoli booth would have to manage without me. I needed air, space, silence. I ducked out, weaving through the crowd until I spotted an open gate. The mission cemetery stretched out in front of me, quiet and still. I didn't hesitate. Most people think graveyards are creepy, but for someone like me, they're peaceful. Ghosts don't linger where they're buried. They haunt the places they loved when they were alive. Right then, surrounded by old headstones and the faint scent of sagebrush, it was the calmest spot at the whole fair. Paul Slater had me questioning everything, whether I was some kind of shifter or something else entirely. And Paul, He wasn't just some scheming high school junior with a crush on me. No, according to his own grandfather, he was something far worse. The realization hit me hard. I'd practically handed him my soul. I needed space to process, to figure out my next move. The cemetery had become my refuge, the quiet shade a welcome escape. I'd taken this narrow path so often it felt like second nature. Sometimes, instead of heading to the bathroom during class, I'd slip out here, drawn to what waited at the end of the trail. But this time, I wasn't alone. Jesse was there, staring at his own grave. I knew the inscription by heart: Hector Jesse da Silva, 1830-1850, beloved brother, son, and friend, because I'd helped carve those words. He turned as I approached, his expression unreadable as always. Without a word, he reached out and I took his hand. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low, "about everything." I shrugged, focusing on the dark soil around the headstone, matching the depth of his eyes. "I get it, I guess." Even though I didn't. You can't force yourself to feel something you don't. The second the words left my mouth, I wanted to vanish. But then Jesse's voice cracked with something raw, something I'd never heard before. "Is that what you think, that I wanted to leave?" I blinked at him. "Didn't you?" My heart, which I'd sworn was long gone, suddenly lurched back to life despite my best efforts to keep it buried. How could I stay? His grip on my hand loosened, and I nearly stumbled, but I barely noticed. Not when he raked a trembling hand through his hair. "After what happened between us, Susanna, how could I?" I was completely lost. "What happened between us?" "That kiss." His voice was rough, his fingers still shaking. "Father Dominic was right. You deserve someone your family can actually see." And just like that, the pieces clicked into place. This wasn't about him not feeling anything. It was about him feeling too much. You need someone who can stand by your side through all the years to come. Someone who's truly alive. Then it hit me, those tense silences between Jesse and me, the way he'd been distant lately. It wasn't because his feelings had faded, not at all. My pulse, sluggish and cold for days, suddenly roared back to life. Part of me worried this was just another illusion, that I'd blink and it would vanish. But when I looked at him, all I could think about was that kiss. "Jesse," I said, my voice thick with joy. None of the rest matters, that moment. It was everything. I thought he already knew. But the way his arms wrapped around me, the way his lips found mine again, it was like the universe finally snapped back into place. For weeks, everything had felt off balance. Now, in his embrace, the world made sense again. Sure, there were complications, him moving out, the whole mess with Paul, but none of it could overshadow the truth. He loved me. And this time, no ghosts, no interruptions, just us. Meanwhile, my latest supernatural errand wasn't going as planned. Mrs. Gutierrez had sworn the stone in her backyard hid a tin box beneath it. But under the twisted hibiscus branches, with the fog rolling in from the coast, my fingers clawed through damp soil and found nothing. Then a twig cracked. My stomach dropped. Getting caught trespassing in Carmel again would be a disaster. Until I saw him, that unmistakable silhouette, darker than the night itself. "Hello, Suze," he said, his voice steady as ever. Unlike mine, which always betrayed me when he was near. And it wasn't just my voice that reacted. Every part of me did. I wasn't about to let him see how much he was getting to me. "Hand it over," I demanded, stretching my palm out toward him. He tipped his head back with a loud laugh. "Seriously?" he asked, shaking his head like I'd lost my mind. "I'm not kidding, Paul," I said, forcing my voice to stay level even as my resolve started crumbling like wet sand. "That's $2,000, Suze," he said, dragging out the words like I needed the reminder. $2,000. "And it's Julio Gutierrez's money," I shot back, trying to sound more certain than I felt. "Not yours," Paul scoffed, his voice thick with mockery. "Oh yeah, sure, and what's Julio gonna do, file a police report? He doesn't even know it's gone, Suze. Hell, he never knew it existed." "Because his grandma passed before she could tell him," I snapped. "Then he won't miss it, will he?" Even in the dim light, I could practically hear the smirk in his voice. "Can't mourn what you never knew you had. Mrs. Gutierrez knows," I said, dropping my hand so he wouldn't notice the tremor. My voice, though, wasn't as easy to steady. "If she finds out you took it, she'll hunt you down." "Who says she hasn't already?" he asked, so casually it sent a chill down my spine, and not from the crisp October air. I didn't want to believe him, but why would he lie? Mrs. Gutierrez must have gone to him too, desperate for help. How else would he have known about the cash? Poor woman. She'd trusted the wrong person. Because clearly, Paul hadn't just stolen from her. No, he'd done worse. Then, as if sensing my thoughts, though how, with the sky choked by clouds, his tone shifted, softening. "Suze, Suze, Suze," he murmured, pulling his hand from his coat pocket and slinging an arm around my shoulders. "What am I gonna do with you?" I stayed silent. Words wouldn't have come even if I'd tried. My chest felt tight, my mind racing with thoughts of Mrs. Gutierrez and what he'd done. How could someone who smelled like expensive cologne, clean and sharp, and radiated warmth, so welcome against the cold bite of the wind, be so cold-blooded? "Here's an idea," Paul said, his voice vibrating through me as he pulled me closer. "We split it, 1,000 each." I had to force down the bile rising in my throat before I could speak. "You're disgusting." "Don't be like that," he said, almost playfully. "It's a fair deal. Do whatever you want with your half. Send it back to the Gutierrezes if it makes you feel better. Or," he added, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "be smart. Buy yourself a car now that you've got that license. With that kind of cash, you could buy yourself a nice car. No more sneaking your mom's keys when she's passed out on the couch." "I hate you," I shot back, wrenching free from his hold. The night air rushed in, cold where his warmth had been. "No, you don't," he said. A sliver of moonlight broke through the clouds just long enough for me to catch his crooked smirk. "You're just pissed because I'm right." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Stealing from a dead woman is right to you." "Obviously," he replied, his voice dripping with amusement even as the darkness swallowed his face again. "She's not exactly gonna miss it. You and Father Dom total softies. But hey, how'd you even understand her rambling? Thought you were stuck in French class, not Spanish." I hesitated. My mind raced for an answer that wouldn't drag him into this, the one name that sent my pulse into overdrive. But before I could lie, Paul figured it out. "Oh," he said flatly, "him should have known." I scrambled for something to say, anything to shift the mood, but he cut me off. "You know what? I'm done. Catch you later, Simon." Just like that, he turned to leave. My stomach twisted. I couldn't let him walk away with that money. Reasoning hadn't worked, and Jesse would hate this, but what choice did I have? The box was tucked inside his jacket. I'd felt it when he pulled me close. All I needed was one good distraction, maybe a sharp jab to the ribs. Then I could grab it and toss it through the nearest window. The Gutierrezes would panic at the sound of shattering glass, but they weren't about to call the cops over $2,000 spilled on their floor. Not my finest plan, but it was all I had. "Paul," I called. He stopped. Turned the moon suddenly peeked through the heavy clouds, casting a silvery glow that revealed Paul's ridiculously optimistic face. His expression brightened even more as I stepped closer across the damp lawn. For a second, he probably thought he'd finally worn me down, found my breaking point, convinced me to join his twisted little scheme. All for the bargain price of $1,000. Yeah, right. That hopeful look vanished the instant he spotted my clenched fist. I swear I even saw a flicker of wounded pride in his pale blue eyes, almost ghostly under the moonlight. Then the clouds swallowed the moon again, plunging us back into darkness. Before I could react, Paul moved faster than I thought possible, grabbing my wrists with a bruising grip and sweeping my legs out from under me. Next thing I knew, I was flat on my back in the wet grass, his weight pressing down, his face inches from mine. "That was a mistake," he said, way too calm for someone whose heartbeat was pounding against my ribs. "Offers off the table." His breathing was steady, unlike my ragged gasps, but I refused to let him see how scared I was. "What offer?" I managed between breaths. "The money split. I'm keeping it all now. You really know how to hurt a guy, Suze." "Tragic," I shot back, forcing sarcasm into my voice. "Now get off me. These jeans aren't cheap and you're ruining them." But Paul wasn't in the mood for jokes. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Want me to make your boyfriend vanish like I did Mrs. Gutierrez?" Despite the warmth of his body, a chill shot through me, freezing my blood in my veins. I couldn't let him see it, though. People like Paul feed on fear. "We had a deal," I said, my lips stiff with dread. "I promised not to kill him," he corrected. "Never said I'd stop him from dying." I stared up at him, confused. What does that even mean? "Figure it out," he murmured before brushing a cold kiss against my lips. "Sweet dreams, Suze." Then he was gone, swallowed by the fog. It took me a second to realize I could move again. The night air rushed in where his body had been, leaving me shivering. I rolled onto my side, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Still, I found the strength to yell, "Paul, wait." That's when the Gutierrez house blazed to life, flooding the backyard with blinding light. The sound of a window sliding open cut through the night, followed by a sharp voice yelling, "Hey, what do you think you're doing down there?" I didn't wait to see if they'd dial 911. I scrambled to my feet, sprinting toward the same fence I'd climbed earlier. My mom's sedan was still parked where I'd abandoned it, and I threw myself inside, gripping the wheel as I sped off. The entire drive home, I muttered about another mediator who'd got me into this mess, glaring at the fresh green streaks ruining my favorite pair of jeans. Little did I know, my problems with Paul were just beginning. The worst was yet to come.